Alright, so here we are. Ready for another set of meaningless YouTube drivel. And a lot of positivity when it comes to the game in question, Super Mario Odyssey. What's up, chat? Everything good, I hope? Let's see if I can't find the video. There we go. Yeah. What's going on? Chair's making noise. Anyways, we're gonna start off by watching a hyper-analytical retrospective of the best Mario game ever made by Demeech. It's 22 minutes long, almost 23. We're focusing, as you can see on the title, we're focusing on the positive videos, and also the one by Arlo, because it came out right as Odyssey came out, so that's an interesting perspective to just see how the general consensus has changed over the time when the game released. Anyways, I think we're just gonna go right ahead and start the video.
You are now watching Demeech.
Hopefully the audio is better than it was last time.
It's hard to believe the Nintendo Switch is over half a decade old. I remember waiting at a Walmart to get it day one, and a few months later, bringing it on my first trip to Greece with my library of a whopping 4 games. Overall, I was very excited for the future of Nintendo, and nowhere was this more apparent than with Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey is hands down the most hyped I've ever been for a game. Even when we only got 5 seconds of footage in the Switch reveal trailer in 2016, I knew we were in for something truly incredible. And the official reveal? Let me tell you, it was mind-blowing. Super Mario Odyssey seemed monumental for the Mario series.
Yeah, I seem to remember the official reveal. It's pretty good. They showcased a lot of different stuff, right? I think this is the reveal trailer he's showing off.
Not only did it bring creativity back after years of generic Mario games, but it was also the return of
years of generic Mario games. We had, yeah, maybe it was kind of generic. Like we had the 2D ones. The last 3D one was Galaxy 2, right? Or well, Land, I think. World, actually, 3D World. I guess it did feel kind of generic, kind of like a half step between 2D and 3D.
Sandbox 3D Mario, and when the game released, the hype was all worth it. Super Mario Odyssey is a game that's very special to me. From the hype leading up to it, to the 12-hour session playing the game on launch day, and the over 300 hours I've put
12 hours
into it. I think it's fair to say I found Super Mario Odyssey to be more than just your average game. But it's been half a decade since then. Things can change, so in honor of Super Mario Odyssey's 5th anniversary, I wanted to revisit it and see if it was just as great as I remembered it. Put your hats on and get your Super Mario cereal as we revisit Super Mario Odyssey 5 years later.
Oh boy.
Our story begins the way Mario games usually end. Mario and Bowser duke it out on his fancy airship in the skies above the Mushroom Kingdom. Why Bowser has such a fancy airship isn't because he suddenly made good decisions and invested in gold during the events of New Super Mario Bros. 2, but because he plans on marrying Peach. Though? Mario actually ends up losing the battle and ends up in a mysterious new kingdom, and he loses his hat as well. If the suit isn't enough to show that Bowser means business, then the disrespect to Mario's hat will. Luckily, Mario meets a new character, Cappy, who is also on a quest to stop Bowser because he captured his sister Tiara, and thus, Mario and Cappy set out on a journey to stop Bowser's wedding and rescue Peach and Tiara. Already before the game even begins, Super Mario Odyssey has an edge. With most Mario games, it's never explained why Bowser captures Peach. It could be because he has devious ideas, or he just needs someone to play Mario Party 10 with. Yet again, that would be a pretty devious idea, but it's clear as day here that in Super Mario Odyssey, his goal is to marry Princess Peach. Honestly, if his goal is marriage, he should probably go on OK Koopa and find a girl that actually wants him, or better yet, do the unthinkable and actually talk to them. I'm sure there's a Koopa just like Bowser out there, and Bowser will probably find that out eventually. But come on, it's a Mario game, not a dating sim.
You don't skip
if you want that, you'd have to talk to Francis.
Not talking to
While the story isn't anything groundbreaking,
right?
I appreciate the effort to do something out of the ordinary, even if it's not taken as far as I would have liked. But considering this is a 3D Mario game, a good story is nice to have, but the gameplay is the most important factor.
Stop. It's not a good story. It's serviceable. I wouldn't call it good, not by a long shot. I mean, story has always been the last part of Mario games, like they implement, right? And it's pretty obvious here too. You don't actually see a lot of Bowser, or Peach for that matter.
Starting with Super Mario Galaxy, the 3D Mario games took a more linear approach. The Galaxy games were structured to be linear, but they still had strong elements of open world 3D Mario with the hidden stars. Super Mario 3D Land and 3D World, on the other hand, are totally linear level design wise. When it comes to what I prefer, it's hard to say. I love open world 3D Mario, but I also love linear 3D Mario.
Wait, hang on.
3D Mario with the hidden stars. Super Mario 3D Land and 3D World, on the other hand, are totally linear level design wise.
I wouldn't call Galaxy like open. Not really. It's kind of unifying the 2D and 3D aspects of Mario. So it's not as much of a half step as the Land and World games are, but it's still similar. It's not like Sunshine or 64 in that you have open worlds that you can just go explore and find stuff in, right? Even Sunshine kind of strayed a bit from that, which kind of makes 64 unique.
When it comes to what I prefer, it's hard to say. I love open world 3D Mario, but I also love linear 3D Mario. But if there's one thing I wasn't fond of, it was simplifying Mario's movement in the linear games. There wasn't much to do outside of the standard running and jumping, not even the triple jump in 3D World, and this was a common criticism of that game. And when it came to Odyssey, that feedback was taken into account, because Mario's moveset is larger and more versatile than it's ever been before. Mario can of course run and jump. Moves such as the long jump and wall jump are also retained, but classic moves such as the triple jump and dive also make a comeback. Mario can even somersault for a speed boost. Mario's control is better than it's ever been before and is near perfection.
Roll, right?
There's no jank present, everything controls how you would expect it to, and the physics are an absolute dream. This is hands down the best Mario has ever felt to control, and I haven't even accounted for the expanded moveset with Cappy. Cappy can act as a platform and allow Mario to have some extra jumping distance, and acts as great insurance if you misjudge a jump. He can even grab coins. His extended moveset allows for Mario to have an incredibly versatile moveset, which not only gives more options, but makes the game even more fun. One of the best aspects of Super Mario Odyssey is controlling Mario, but what if I were to tell you that not only do you take control of Mario, but also take control of Mario taking control over enemies? Rather than power-ups, Super Mario Odyssey has captures. Cappy can use his ghostly abilities to allow Mario to take control over enemies and obstacles. You'll feel firsthand how worthless it is being a Goomba, or even earning a newfound respect for the Hammer Brothers after realizing they can only throw hammers or pans in an arc. Reminds me of the classic video Bowser's Minions. There are so many captures in the game, with some of my favorites being the Hammer Brothers, Glide on the Flying Lizard, and of course the T-Rex. And I'm not sure if it was intentional, but the Gushin enemies in the Seaside Kingdom really give me Super Mario Sunshine vibes. There are captures that are definitely favorites, but honestly, it's hard to find one I didn't have fun with. When you have a game with many sections that play differently, developers have to keep in mind to make sure the mechanics are well thought out, and in Super Mario Odyssey, The many sections with a capture ability in mind are designed excellently. In Steam Gardens, you take control of the uproot enemies. There are many beans throughout the kingdom that you break by extending with the uproot's legs, and in Mount Volbono, you traverse through the islands through lava as a lava bubble. Already, we have a very unique Mario game, and nowhere is this more apparent than with the kingdoms, and so far, we have a Mario game where you take control of a T-Rex. That alone shows you how creative this game is. The theme of Super Mario Odyssey is traveling around the world, but unlike Mario 3 Around the World, this is actually a good game. Many of the kingdoms are based on real-world locations.
That's interesting.
Instead of going for the standard Egyptian theme, the Sand Kingdom Tostarena is based on Mexico, complete with a colorful town and Sugar Skull residents. New Donk City is an entire metropolis for Mario to explore, and although the realistic humans are pretty out there, it's oddly fitting for a Mario game. But perhaps the coolest theme for a kingdom is the colorful Luncheon Kingdom, complete with blocky food and tubby custard for lava. The theming is excellent, but the design of the kingdoms is still the most important factor, and for the most part, the design is excellent. They're quite large in scope with many areas to explore. I honestly liked all the main kingdoms in the game, but if I had to choose one I wasn't too crazy about, it would be Lake Remote.
Analytical retrospective, right? Is that everything you're going to say?
It's a bit cramped, and although the theming of Atlantis is cool, seeing an actual kingdom based on Greece in a Mario game is something
cool.
I've wanted for years. And thankfully we got that with Beacon Beach and Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope, based on Santorini. I'm aware Atlantis is based on Greek mythology, but a kingdom based on the country is what I wanted. But even so, I think the portrayal of Atlantis here is far better than another one I've seen. If there were two other kingdoms I wasn't too crazy about, it would be the side kingdoms that served as boss arenas. It's disappointing they weren't full-on kingdoms, especially the second one. But overall, the kingdoms are designed very well and have excellent theming. To travel to the kingdoms, you select which one you want to go to in the Odyssey. I thought the lack of a hub world would be something I might miss, but it wasn't a problem for me. Unlike linear 3D Mario games, the focus isn't so much about the platforming as it is the exploration to find the Power Moons. Power Moons are Odyssey's equivalent to Power Stars or Shine Sprites. The concept is the same. All of them are the objective needed to progress, but Power Moons function a bit differently. They are tied to missions, but obtaining one doesn't end a level. You are free to explore the kingdom as much as you want. Another key difference with the Power Moons is that there are far more of them than there are Power Stars or Shine Sprites in prior games, but to compensate for the sheer amount of them, the objectives to obtain them are simpler and not as in-depth. Many of them can be right out in the open or only require a simple ground pound, and at face value, this seems like it could be an issue. In fact, the abundance of moons is one of the most discussed aspects about the game. Too many moons, if you will. Alright guys, video is over. Super Mario Odyssey gets a 7.8 out of 10. Too much moons. All jokes aside, are there too many moons? And if so, is too much of a good thing not a good thing at all? Or is it too much of a good thing is wonderful? The game has nearly 1,000 Power Moons to collect. That number right there can seem a bit overwhelming, but as I stated before, the objectives to obtain moons are often as simple as breaking cheese blocks with a chef brother or lighting torches. In a game like Super Mario 64, which only has 7 objectives per world, now that would be alarming, but the moons are completely structured around the sandbox level design.
Wait, is it?
The satisfaction...
Hang on. I don't actually remember how many moons there are. Amount of moons Odyssey. 880. Okay. You can take that number up to 999 if you buy duplicates from in-game shops. Yeah, so nearly 1,900.
Collecting Power Moons isn't solely based on an objective. In a game like Super Mario 64, you can obtain Power Stars out of order, but the solution is usually straightforward. But in Odyssey, there are many different ways you can go about collecting moons. Let's say there's one in the distance in Tostarena. Mario can capture a Bullet Bill, or use Glidon. And if you're really skilled, you could try to make a tricky jump off the moving platforms above the Moais. The satisfaction of Odyssey isn't so much about the moon itself, but how it rewards exploration. The fun is discovering every nook and cranny of a cave.
I like that. I've been thinking around the same lines, that it's not the Power Moons themselves that are the reward, but rather the act of finding it. I think that's an idea that's worth exploring, because a lot of people seem to think that the moon itself is the reward, right?
Kingdom and being rewarded with either
So,
a moon or purple
definitely
coins
an
for
idea I'm
doing
gonna explore
so.
more of.
And the game was specifically designed to be suitable to play in short bursts on the go, or if you want to marathon it on the TV. But not all the moons are based on simple objectives. There are many rooms throughout the kingdoms with platforming sections. These rooms will almost always have 2 moons to find, with one being at the end of a section, and others being hidden. Sometimes they'll even be centered around a specific capture ability. And there are also mini-games where you can obtain power moons. There's a lot of variety, and even though the objectives can be the same throughout the kingdoms, the way you obtain the moons will be different. I understand how some might think the moons can get repetitive, but for me, it was never an issue. But if there's something I think most of us can agree on, it's with the bosses in the game. This game has some really cool bosses, but the issue is, they only take 3 hits to take out. Bosses being too easy has been a problem Mario has had for many years, and just because it's always been this way, that doesn't mean it should continue to be a thing. And unfortunately, that's an issue even Odyssey couldn't escape. And speaking of challenge, it would have been nice to have the game be more challenging. A lot of the challenge comes from collecting all the power moons, but having the option at least for a more difficult mode would have been nice. In addition to the power moons, there's a secondary collectible being the purple coins. There are about 50 to 100 of them per kingdom. Unlike the moons, you don't need them to complete the game, and you don't need an objective to get them. They're usually out in the open, you just need to keep your eyes peeled. But what's cool about them, and one of the coolest aspects about Odyssey, is the way coins are handled. For the first time in a mainline game outside of Super Mario
Is it
Run,
really that
coins
cool
are used as
aspect, though?
currency. You can
mean,
get
I
grand
like
hearts with them
that you
as
can-
well as power moons,
you
but by
have
far their coolest
actual
use is
reason
getting
to collect
costumes
them.
for Mario to wear.
Right.
Nowadays, it's common
They're
to see Mario outside of the
actually
standard overalls and
optional.
hat, but before Odyssey, it was an
Mostly
incredibly
optional.
rare sight. And what's even cooler is many of the costumes reference obscure Mario games. Most of them you can get with standard coins, but the purple coins can get costumes specific to a kingdom's theme, as well as souvenirs for the Odyssey. All these are mostly cosmetic and don't really affect the gameplay outside of a few power moons that require costumes, but it's great being able to have Mario wear different costumes, and I like to often go with the theme of a kingdom, but costumes such as wedding and shirtless Mario are some of my favorites, though I'm not sure how I feel about wedding dress Mario. And hey,
What are you
Green
talking about?
Mario
That's
is
the best
canon.
costume.
I also love the descriptions for the costumes. Look how self-aware the Waluigi one is. The gameplay of Super Mario Odyssey is incredible, and considering how much fun things such as the costumes and
Okay.
theming are, the presentation is where the game can shine even further.
I'm sorry. God, whiplash.
Mario games are known to
Going from
showcase the
costumes
potential of
to
the consoles that
gameplay
they're
so
on.
suddenly.
Games like Super Mario Sunshine as well as the Galaxy games, and even 3D Land, take full advantage of their hardware. The thing is, Super Mario Odyssey is not the first HD 3D Mario game. That would be Super Mario 3D World, which released 4 years prior, and 3D World has a stellar presentation, might I add. Considering the feat of HD was already done, Odyssey did something unique. It goes for a pseudo-realistic style for the characters, giving them far more detail. Mario, for example, has denim overalls, and his hair and mustache are realistic. Enemies such as Chain Chomps and Bullet Bills are scratched up and look more metallic, and this level of detail applies to every character in the game, but the realism primarily just applies to the textures. The characters themselves don't look off and resemble their iconic looks, just more detailed. This should be the modern standard for Mario character design. For some odd reason, Nintendo alternates between the realistic and plastic look for Mario in the Switch era, and I really wish they'd just stick to the Odyssey design, because I find it to be the best by far, and this level of detail applies to most of the game, but considering Odyssey has drastically different kingdoms, the art styles can vary. Forgotten Isle and Mount Valbono look completely different from the more realistic New Donk City and Toast Arena, and this can also apply to enemies such as having a realistic T-Rex in addition to things like Goombas, but if there's one thing that remains consistent, Super Mario Odyssey is a beautiful looking game.
I don't understand the argument here. Like, he really likes the... I mean, the art style is really good. It's one of the best things about the game. But, like, it's supposed to change from kingdom to kingdom, which is why this is really plasticky and other stuff isn't, right? So it's constantly changing from locale to locale. It's just So it's really weird to bring up that it's supposed to be hyper realistic.
Even to this day,
isn't.
it's one of the most impressive looking Switch games, running at a smooth 60 frames per second, and as I stated before, costumes make the visual presentation all the more charming, and this game certainly doesn't have a lack of charm. You'll see things like making flowers bloom to get coins, as well as all kinds of cool references to other Mario games. Music, on the other hand, is a bit of an odd
Like
circumstance.
what, for example?
In more remote areas, it's common to
That's
hear
where you
just
should show
ambience. The
the
ambience
references.
is designed around the kingdom, sure. Chivaria's ambience is noticeably different than Steam Gardens, but even 5 years later, I'm not sure how I feel about it. It didn't bother me, but I feel having music would have been a better choice. But thankfully,
Wait, hang
there
on,
is a
it
lot
does
of
have
music
music,
in the game,
right?
different than
Is
Steam
he
Gardens.
He's talking about
Games
the
running at a
Woody
smooth
Kingdom.
60 frames per second, and as I stated before, costumes make the visual presentation all the more charming, and this game certainly doesn't have a lack of charm. You'll see things like making flowers bloom to get coins, as well as all kinds of cool references to other Mario games. Music, on the other hand, is a bit of an odd circumstance. In more remote areas, it's common to hear just ambience.
Yeah,
the ambience is
literally
designed
at the
around
start
the
of the
kingdom,
Woody
sure.
Kingdom. The second
Chivaria's
you
ambience
go-
is noticeably different than
second you
just
exit through the
ambience.
hole over
The
here,
ambience is designed around the
music
kingdom,
starts
sure.
and it's a
Chivaria's
banger.
ambience is noticeably different than Steam Gardens, but even 5 years later, I'm not sure how I feel about it. It didn't bother me, but I feel having music would have
it's
been a
called
better
theming.
choice. But thankfully,
Although, I think I'll write that down. Music theming is important.
there is a lot of music in the game, and as always, it's great. The standout, of course, being Jump Up Superstar, and this is the game that brought the best Mario girl, Pauline, back into the spotlight. The true one-up girl. The tracks do
The
an
true
excellent job
one-up girl,
capturing the tone of the
indeed.
locations that they're based on. New Donk City, for example, has a very jazzy theme to the music, while Tostarena has a completely different sound, being Latin. The sound effects are also great. I feel with
So
game
is the sound
retrospectives,
Latin,
sound
or-
effects aren't often brought up, but if you have sound effects that aren't fitting, it can hinder the experience. But I'm happy to say the sound effects in Super Mario Odyssey are great and very satisfying to hear. Now, I will admit, the Galaxy games in 3D World have better soundtracks, but what's here is great, and the overall presentation is stellar. And
literally
all this
nothing can
applies
beat
to
Galaxy,
handheld
I
mode
think.
as well, though I always prefer to play on the TV.
Not the music. Ooh.
Super Mario
Wait,
Odyssey
you've been
has some
talking about
massive
content this
replay
entire
value.
time.
If you're going to just beat the game, it's going to be kind of short, only about 8 to 12 hours long. But beating the game is only
Wait,
the
no.
beginning, as there are hundreds of power moons to collect,
If you're
as
gonna
well
just
as
beat the game,
post-game
you can do it in,
content.
like, 4
I've beaten the
hours,
game
probably.
100% at least twice,
Right?
and have sunk in over 300 hours. Safe to say, Super Mario Odyssey has content to the power moon.
Which is actually something I'm gonna write down. I mean, I don't care about length. If the experience is good, then that's the most important part. But is the length of the game too short? When you're not collecting every moon.
Back. What's often brought up is the amount of moons when it comes to content, but what's seldomly brought up is the extra content the game has. It got quite a few additional costumes throughout 2018, as well as the Luigi's Balloon
Actually,
World
he's got a point.
minigame.
People rarely bring up the balloon.
Now, I
world
will
and
admit, the
talk
biggest disappointment
much
of
about
Super
the
Mario
minigames.
Odyssey for me was not having
Well,
Luigi playable,
I guess
but it's
Balloon
good seeing
World
him
is actually
regardless.
the only notable thing.
I'd rather have him playable, but you get what
You
I
can
mean.
actually
It's
spend some
essentially a
time on,
hide and
right?
seek mode
But
with balloons where you can rack up a ton of coins.
fun enough.
The concept of it is fun, but the reality is, a lot of the time, balloons will be in the same place. It's a nice addition regardless, and definitely worth checking
just a
out.
shame that the
And
only
speaking of
thing you
Luigi,
get from it
did you know Super Mario Odyssey has
coins.
multiplayer without him? Yeah, he's not playable, but there is multiplayer, and there's a reason why you forgot about it, because it's pretty much just an extension of the Co-Star multiplayer from Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. It's definitely more fun since Cappy can do more things, but true co-op would have been nice, even if that meant split screen. But believe it or not, there's a mode Super Mario Odyssey has that you may have never realized was in the game.
Oh my
Nintendo
god. I just realized something. I'm thinking that the reason why you don't utilize a lot of Mario's extended movesets, like the cap throw and then jump and then dive and stuff like that in the game, is because this is meant to be played multiplayer with one person controlling Cappy. Huh. That's an idea worth exploring, right? What's the inclusion of multiplayer detrimental to the difficulty?
Originally started off as a toy manufacturer, and even to this day, you'll see elements of that. Nowhere is this more apparent recently than with Labo. In case you haven't heard of it, it was a weird experiment from Nintendo where you construct game peripherals out of cardboard. The idea is cool, but the reality of that ended up being that the building process is fun, but the games are incredibly shallow and are a one and done thing. You know you wouldn't play the games again, but it was insanely expensive at around $80 per set. But the final Labo set, being the VR one, was a bit of the exception. The starter kit was only $40 and it had support in quite a few other games, Super Mario Odyssey being one of them, making it the first 3D Mario game in VR. The second one in 3D. Thank you, Enclosed Granddad, for reminding me of that. So let's check it out. Initially getting into the VR mode, there was an issue. Because Nintendo needs to be Nintendo, there's no head strap for the Labo VR. They really didn't learn anything from the Virtual Boy, did they? You hold it up to your face like a pair of binoculars, and it's uncomfortable for an extended period of time. Thankfully, Dimitri does what Nintendo don't, and I gave the Labo VR headset a head strap from a $5 Walmart VR headset. Now, if I would have made this contraption now, I would have used the leg straps, but this was all the way back in 2019, so that's what I did. There are aftermarket headsets for the Switch now, but I made this before those were even a thing. So let's see if it was worth going to all the trouble for, and see what it's about. Unlike The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the entirety of Odyssey can't be played in VR. Instead, it's its own mode. Your goal is to find musical instruments to give to characters so they can perform in the New Donk City Festival. You'll also need 100 coins to get band members. The mode itself only consists of 3 kingdoms and it's very short. You'll be able to beat it within half an hour. Though to be fair, without the head strap, I couldn't imagine playing Labo VR comfortably for an extended period. Come to think of it, it's not even that enjoyable to begin with. You can't control the camera with the right analog stick and are forced to look around. Oftentimes it's easier to stand up and look, but you can't have anything around you or you might trip. Now I know that would be funny for you guys to watch, but if we want to celebrate Leg Strap Day next year, I gotta be careful. The best way to control the camera is by pressing the right analog stick so it automatically focuses on Mario, and once you get past the initial hoops, all you're left with is a mildly entertaining mode that ends sooner than you started it. But the thing that strikes me as the most odd, what kind of a VR experience is this? You would expect a first-person view, but it's essentially like Mario is a hamster in a cage you're watching over. At least it is in 3D though, so that's kinda cool. You can play it without the Labo VR, and I'd recommend checking it out just for the novelty, but I wouldn't recommend going out of your way to get a headset just to play it. The thing is, the Labo VR mode is truly bonus content, and Super Mario Odyssey has an ample amount of content no matter how you slice it, even before the updates. Now that's something you can't say about a lot of Switch games. In other words, if it didn't have a lot of content, I wouldn't get over 300 hours out of it. So far we've established Super Mario Odyssey has excellent gameplay and excellent presentation, and a ton of content. I do wish there was more music and that the game was more challenging, but other than that, everything has been dang near flawless. So what's the verdict? It's been half a decade. Many games have released, and occasionally my opinion of a game can change over time. At the time, Super Mario Odyssey was not only my favorite Mario game, but my favorite game of all time. This could have been amplified due to Odyssey being a complete revolution for the Mario series, successfully bringing it out of the generic era that the new Super Mario Bros. Series caused. I've had 5 years, nearly 2,000 days to think about it, and I can say, with uttermost certainty, that Super Mario Odyssey, after half a decade, is still my favorite Mario game of all time, and my personal favorite game of all time.
Wow.
Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I feel, is better from a design standpoint, most notably due to the bosses, but Super Mario Odyssey remains my favorite because of the excellent gameplay and the abundance of creativity. Not to mention, I also do prefer the Mario series. It has unique locations, excellent new mechanics, while also remaining true to what makes Mario games great to begin with. And until hopefully a sequel, there's no other game like Super Mario Odyssey.
Okay, so... Damn. I still feel like Joseph Anderson's video was more grounded than this. Even though he fell into a few traps when it comes to the moons. But like, this is not much. This is nothing. He talks about that he says that the game has a lot of content. Its art style is good, I guess. And then it's like, okay, but you're not saying anything about it. Calling this video a hyper-analytical retrospective is probably the reason why people don't take Nintendo YouTubers seriously. Sorry, but it's just the way it is. It's so weird too, because like, but I didn't expect that much, right, from a video that's 22. Will you stop? That's like 22 minutes and has hyper analytical in the title. If anything, it's supposed to be. I was thinking it was gonna be focused on one aspect of the game, but no, not at all. Let's check out the comments. This is an amazing retrospective. No. I'm still getting this game for Easter. I'm beating it in like 2-3 days. I still replay it to this day. I still remember getting this game for Easter. The real showbiz, yeah. Okay, now I'm just jumping over. I'm just kind of making fun of people, and I don't mean that, but it's too easy. Super Mario Odyssey is one of the best masterpieces out there. But the one thing I absolutely love from that game is the Mario 64 outfit. Wow, you're digging deep if that's what you absolutely love from that game. It's actually really impressive that Nintendo actually put that outfit in the game, and it feels spectacular. Also, Super Mario Odyssey itself, it's actually a remake of Super Mario 64 of its own. What? No, it's not. Which means Super Mario Odyssey is the Super Mario 64 remake we've been wanting truthfully. There's a lot of weird takes here. We had a really similar approach with the game. As a big Mario fan, I was really, really hyped for the game and for the Switch after the January 2017 trailer. Then I played it, and it was even better than what I thought. It's still my favorite Mario game and my personal best of all time game. Something you didn't talk much about is about how magical the festival feels. It gives me goosebumps. Just an happy and fun moment. And the song is amazing. Like, you didn't talk a lot about anything, dude. Please. Alright, so maybe watching a video called a hyper-analytical retrospective that's only 22 minutes and expecting something good is on me. But we have more videos. Ah, Jesus Christ. I hope they aren't all like this. We have this video from
on October 20th.
Mario Mikester. No, this was the guy who said he redid the video. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I was wrong. Jesus Christ, I wonder if that previous guy actually remade the video. What it would be, how it would look. Anyways, so this guy is one that did a video earlier and then remade it later. This is a relatively new video released the 7th of July this year. By What Made Super Mario Odyssey So Perfect by Mario Meister. I have no idea what to expect. Probably getting to learn about what made Super Mario Odyssey so perfect, I suppose, but let's see if it actually, does it show up at all? Yeah, it does. All right.
2016, Nintendo gave us a first look at their brand new console, the Nintendo Switch. This first look trailer showed off a bunch of games that would be releasing on the system. We saw the new upcoming 3D Zelda game, a port of Mario Kart 8, and even Skyrim running on the system. But out of all the games we saw in this trailer, there was one that caught almost everyone's eye. One game that looked to be a return to form for one of gaming's most iconic franchises. And one that would be remembered for years to come. That game is none other than Super Mario Odyssey. And although we didn't know it when we initially saw this clip back in 2016, before the game even had a name, Super Mario Odyssey would eventually go on to be one of the best Mario games ever made. And in this video, I want to truly see what made it such a masterpiece. My name is Mario Meister, and welcome to a Super Mario Odyssey retrospective. Released worldwide on October 27, 2017, Super Mario Odyssey is the 6th mainline 3D Mario game. Development for this game began all the way back in late 2013, shortly after the release of Super Mario 3D World. One of, if not the biggest focus the team had during the development of this game, was to appeal to Mario's core audience, rather than appealing to the wider, more casual audience they had been appealing to since Super Mario Galaxy's release back in 2007. To appeal to Mario's core audience...
No. I don't think that's very true. And I also don't think that Galaxy appealed to the casual audience because that game was hard. As in certain places. Much harder than anything in Odyssey. Like this
appealing
specifically,
to Super Mario Galaxy.
It's kind of hard if you don't, if you're not used to
appeal to Mario's core audience. The game was designed around returning to the open-ended sandbox level design of Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Sunshine, instead of the much more linear design seen in all the other 3D Marios at the time. And in order to best captivate this core audience and make the gameplay feel as much like a return to the roots of 3D Mario as possible, many prominent developers and staff who worked on 64 and Sunshine were brought on board to work on Odyssey. But the team didn't want to entirely rely on the roots of 3D Mario. They also wanted to introduce tons of new mechanics and ideas that would keep the gameplay feeling fresh. One of the many new mechanics they messed around with in the early stages of the game's development was the capture mechanic. And after working on and refining it for a few days, they realized just how much potential it had, and eventually decided to focus the entire game around it. And as the game wrapped up its decently long development period of around 4 years, Super Mario Odyssey was properly revealed to the public, title and all, on January 13th, 2017.
Gotta say though, that was an awesome reveal trailer.
Super Mario Odyssey opens up with a classic confrontation
Just
between
like
Mario and Bowser aboard Bowser's airship,
like that.
where Mario seems to have caught Bowser before he was able to escape whilst trying to kidnap Peach, and the two are duking it out. However, unlike most confrontations between the two, Bowser actually wins here by catching Mario off guard with his boomerang
Bowser
hat
wins
and
every
sends him
confrontation at the
flying
start
off
of
into the air.
With
only his
Galaxy
hat
1,
remaining on
Galaxy
the ship
2.
before it's promptly disposed of by Bowser and shredded to pieces.
Yeah, the last
This opening does an
3D
amazing job
truly
at setting up the
3D
fact
games,
that
Bowser
Bowser's going to be an
wins.
actual threat this time around.
and that's the setup for the
Unlike
story.
whatever he had going on in 3D World. I love that when he's speaking, although a lot of it is just growling gibberish, you can actually make out when he names both Mario and Peach. After the game's opening cutscene though, rather than Mario waking and starting off in a happy and upbeat grassy plain like we've seen over and over in the Mario series, he instead wakes up in this gloomy, monochromatic place known as Bonneton, where he's greeted by Cappy, your companion and partner for the game. Bonneton is a great area to start the game in. Not only is its gloomy and dark
He's
atmosphere
right,
such a well-needed
but
change
does
of
he
pace
explain
from
why?
what we're used to in opening levels from Mario games, the dark and desolate nature of the kingdom is actually intended to reflect the feelings of Mario and the player as they begin their adventure. I mean, Mario is just defeated and has no idea where he is. So it makes sense for the emotion conveyed by this kingdom to be sadness, with the fog surrounding Bonneton representing his confusion. And after coming to grips with the basics of the controls and teaming up with Cappy, here in Bonneton, you're also introduced to the capture mechanic, with the game having you capture a frog in order to effortlessly scale the tower. I think a frog being the first capture of this game is honestly a pretty smart move. Not only is it an incredibly simple, but incredibly useful capture, just requiring you to jump to use its ability, it also showcases that you can capture almost anything in this game, not just average Mario enemies. This game is amazing. The climax of this tutorial kingdom is your introduction to the Broodals, goons who Bowser has hired to plan his wedding and take care of Mario. And although your fight with the first Broodal here, Topper, is relatively simple, I really do appreciate Nintendo designing completely new side villains here instead of reusing Boom Boom or Bowser Jr. It's just one of the many things that makes Odyssey feel distinct. And I mean, speaking of Odyssey's distinctiveness, I can't forget about its incredible assortment of kingdoms. Super Mario Odyssey is meant to be an adventure. It's a globetrotting journey across the world, hence the title of Odyssey, so its kingdoms should represent that, and each one should be diverse and different from each other in order to truly make it feel like you're traveling the world. And the game absolutely delivers on this with its kingdoms. While at first, a lot of the locations in the game may seem like formulaic rehashes of basic Mario level themes, like Cascade and Sand Kingdom seeming to be just your average grass and desert levels, the kingdoms that stick to these formulaic themes all have something unique about them that set them apart from locations that have used these themes before. Cascade Kingdom has a prehistoric theme, even featuring a literal T-Rex and the fossil of a giant Triceratops. The Lake Kingdom has this Atlantis-inspired theme, with its Greek architecture and underwater city. And the Seaside Kingdom is a French-inspired beach resort, complete with a volleyball minigame. And the kingdoms that aren't based off classic Mario themes and are in fact brand new, well, those kingdoms are just amazing. Of course you have the big one, the one Nintendo promoted tirelessly up until this game's launch, that they even created a live-action music video for, the Metro Kingdom, which I'll talk a lot more about later. But you also have Bowser's Kingdom, a beautiful traditional Japanese-inspired take on the Koopa's castle. The Luncheon Kingdom, which combines a volcano theme with a food theme to create this colorful and weirdly upbeat location inhabited by living forks. And finally, Crumble Den, aka the Ruin Kingdom, which is like this Dark Souls-esque location that features this incredibly cool boss fight against a giant dragon referred to as the Lord of Lightning, that I desperately wish got fully realized into an entire kingdom due to how original and cool its design is.
Yeah,
but
one of the
Odyssey's kingdoms are
dumb
just fun to
things about
look at
Odyssey.
due to their unique
I know.
theming. They're also an absolute blast to
Boss
explore
kingdoms
thanks to this game's legendary movement.
way too short.
Super Mario Odyssey, without a
small.
doubt, has the best movement of any 3D Mario game. There is no competition. It has basic movement options like the long jump, double and triple jump, and of course the wall jump that are more than enough for inexperienced players to make their way through the game. But for those more experienced players who want to go a bit further with the game's movement and master it, there are a ton of other moves that, when used in conjunction with each other, offer so many fun ways to overcome obstacles and move around quickly. For example, inside the Sand Kingdom's inverted pyramid, as soon as you enter, you're met with a large gap and a bullet bill launcher that's shooting bullet bills at you. Now, in order to cross this gap, you could just capture a bullet and make your way across with ease,
Darwin.
or you
What's
could
up?
say, no, I don't need the bullet. and instead
Small
make your way
ant
across
fan
with clever
Darwin,
and relatively
right?
precise usage
Yeah.
of the movement that is just so much more fun, fast, and satisfying.
Yeah, he's got
It
a
really
point
feels
there,
like-
right? Because some of the challenges are obviously they might not seem like it, but you can use Mario's movement to get from one place to another, like inside the pyramid, or you can use the capture mechanic. But I feel like, especially with the bullet bill there, it's just so much faster and easier to just use the bullet bill, and it's not fun enough to just use jumping to get across. That's just that specific spot, but I mean, it's fun enough.
Like a lot of Odyssey was
Hey,
designed
Dragonox
with this
17, what's
two
up?
solutions to the puzzle idea in mind. You have the intended path that most people will take, and whether that be through capturing a conveniently placed enemy or following the direction the game is pointing you in. And then you have the less intended path that usually requires a decent understanding of the movement in order to pull off. I absolutely love this idea. On my first playthrough of the game, I didn't really understand Mario's movement all that well, so I usually stuck to the intended path. But on every subsequent replay I do of this game, I'm always finding new and unique ways to tackle challenges because of how well-rounded I've become with Mario's movement and physics. And the game doesn't just reward your understanding of the movement with quicker paths.
I'm surprised no one's talked about this yet, because he's right. There's a lot of stuff you can do with Mario's movement that that makes the game more fun, more fluid. Like, you don't have to follow the set paths. It's just, you can easily jump from platform to platform without using the capture mechanics, without going the intended path, just by exploiting Mario's movements.
It also rewards you for going out of your way to reach certain areas that may seem inaccessible at first. One of the best examples of this can be found in the giant room under Toast Arena, where the binding band
Who's
used to be
small
held.
ant
Here, there are pillars
Darwin
surrounding it
anyways?
that at first just seem like simple set pieces to decorate the room.
Yeah,
But
hack
if you try to
switches
reach these
here.
pillars by making
Well,
clever use of Cappy,
good for you.
you'll actually
I'm
be
thinking about hacking my Switch myself, actually. Don't tell Nintendo, though. I have one of the original launch Switches, so that should be pretty easy.
rewarded by sets of invisible coins scattered about on each of the pillars. This, in and of itself, is already cool. But what's more is if you take it a step further and make your way onto this small sliver of rock outlining the door, and perform a well-timed cap jump to make your way on top of the doorway, you'll actually be rewarded with a giant stack of 200 coins, just because you were curious enough to try to get up there.
Yeah, look at that. Like, I read in an interview that the devs said that the playtesters they just kept finding ways to get up to new places, like this freaking roof here. So they planted coins there, and it's always a nice surprise, right? When you get up to somewhere you thought was inaccessible, and then you just see a bunch of coins. Don't worry, I'm gonna just play Odyssey mods. I kind of want to get that for Odyssey mods too.
And in Bowser's Kingdom,
Then again, I might
right
just
below the
emulate
area
it.
where Bowser takes off in his airship with Peach, there's a giant Bowser head that's similar to the pillars in Toast Arena, just seems like a decoration at first. But is actually somewhere you can get to by literally jumping down from above and angling yourself so you don't fall off. Here, you're not rewarded with coins, but rather a power moon. Meaning that not only was this area somewhere they knew you could go, but somewhere they expected you to go. And by making light of the sheer amount of movement possibilities you have in this game, and just how much effort was put into it, it may seem like Mario's movement is the forefront of this game, its main draw. But it's actually not, and that's the beauty of it. The main draw of Odyssey, and its main focus, is the captures, having the ability to be almost anything. So the fact that Nintendo put
I don't
this
know if
much
I
effort
agree
into
with
Mario's movement, and the
but
fact that it controls so well, is just a testament to how polished Odyssey is, and how much love was put into it. This game truly encapsulates the beauty of the original sandbox 3D Mario's 64 and Sunshine by offering open levels and stellar movement, but also expands upon them with so many new ideas. One of the many new ideas Odyssey introduces is the purple coins. Now, the concept of actual purple colored coins in Mario games isn't new. We already saw them in Super Mario Galaxy. But their usage and purpose here is completely new and different. In Odyssey, the purple coins are an actual currency you use, separate from the regular coins you collect, that can be used to buy souvenirs and costumes from a clothing franchise called Crazy Cat, but can only be used in the specific kingdom you collected them in. The main gimmick with the purple coins is that there's only a set amount of them in each major kingdom, with the goal being to find them all and be able to buy everything in each kingdom's purple coin shop. Now, in concept, I think the purple coins are an amazing idea. It's just another way Odyssey incentivizes exploration of its open sandbox levels. But in execution, this idea isn't without its problems. A lot of the time when you're trying to collect an entire set of a kingdom's purple coins, you'll always be stuck on one or two pairs you can't seem to find, despite you searching up and down every area tirelessly. Only to finally cave in and look up a tutorial online to find that they were hidden in the stupidest place possible.
Yeah, screw
like,
the purple.
just look at
Some
the
of those
set of purple coins in the
just
Snow
stupid.
King.
I was looking around Toast Arena the other day, because I thought I was only missing 3 coins, which I noticed. I could find like to the side, like off the cliff side of the level. It's just so stupid. And I noticed it because Joseph Anderson, the video we watched on Saturday, he collected them there, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll go collect them. Collected them. Turns out I'm actually missing like 6 more, and I have no idea where they are. And those can be unlocked by scanning a Bowser amiibo. It's stupid.
You literally have to jump into a hole in the ground that seemingly would kill you, but instead has a place you can land in to collect the coins.
Unless
holes in the ground.
Unless you buy all the souvenirs first instead of the costumes, which why would you? So that you can't get the costume moons. So yeah, it's just like, ugh, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Usually mean death. This was a concept that has been literally burned into Mario players.
I don't hate the purple coins. Some of the locations are what I have issues with. Yeah, I like the purple coins. The idea of having something to collect that you're incentivized to collect because of all the cool things you can buy with them, that's awesome. But some of the locations they're placed in is just so stupid. Thankfully, if you actually buy the costumes first, then screw the souvenirs and stickers, right? The costumes are what actually matters.
Heads since World 1-1 in Super Mario Bros. So why they decided to hide a pair of purple coins here is beyond me. Now, I don't think the solution to the purple coins' issues is to remove them outright. They are a really good idea, just plagued with some awful spots that they're hidden in that can turn a lot of players off from wanting to find them. The real way to fix purple coins is obvious. Either don't hide them in absurd spots, or allow the player to buy hints/arrows that point them in the right direction without fully giving out their location. Overall, I really like the purple coins.
That's a good idea.
They are a genuinely cool new idea. I just wish they weren't annoying to collect.
The Bowser amiibo.
But my absolute favorite new idea introduced in Odyssey is very unsurprisingly the capture mechanic. It's hard, for me at least, to fully appreciate the capture mechanic as much as I did when the game first came out, just because of how used to it I am, because of how much I've played Odyssey now. But on my first playthrough of the game, I remember having an absolute blast just throwing my hat at anything that looked capturable and seeing what new powers they gave me. I mean, the fact that you can capture literally almost anything, yes, I mean anything, is just such a genius idea that allows for limitless possibilities.
Saying like that is kind of disingenuous.
And while some of the captures in the game, like the meat or the boulder, may seem underwhelming and are more there as sort of a joke capture to make you laugh a bit, the ones with actual effort put into them, which is like 90% of them, are done remarkably well. And it's not like the game overuses certain captures and is rarely introducing new ones. It's always moving on to the next thing before you can even fully understand the last one's abilities. And despite there being over 50 things to capture in the game, Odyssey feels like it barely scratches the surface of this mechanic's potential. These captures aren't just one-off things to solve a puzzle that become useless right after either. They open so many possibilities within levels, so many different ways to traverse around, and are, for the most part, so unique from one another. The fact that within the first hour of this game, you can be a frog, an electrical wire, a chain chomp.
Good idea. I might be in the minority, but I've always believed that, for the most part, there are no such things as good or bad ideas, just bad executions. Yeah, I guess.
A T-Rex, a pair of binoculars, a bullet bill, a Goomba, and a cactus. Just shows the beauty of this mechanic and how many ideas it throws at you in such...
Especially Odyssey, there's a bunch of good ideas here, but some of the executions are mixed, I guess.
a short period of time. Even if we don't ever get an Odyssey 2, I really hope this mechanic returns in some shape or form. Nintendo could do so much with it. And all of this, the movement, the purple coins, the capture mechanic, the creativity, it all culminates together in the absolute pinnacle of Super Mario Odyssey, New Donk City. New Donk City is one of my favorite locations in any Mario game. There is so much to do here. You have its main mission, which first involves visiting the location during a thunderstorm and scaling the city hall to defeat the giant Mecha Wiggler who's been sucking the power from the city. Then you're recruiting band members for Pauline's festival, investigating the sewers of New Donk City, and finally taking place in the festival, which is still one of the coolest moments in any Mario game. But you also have everything outside of the main mission. I mean, you have an entire city to explore here. You can jump off cars, swing off streetlights, race an RC car, jump rope, and even play through a remake of Super Mario.
Such amazing activities as walk upstairs, be a villain to the people in traffic, and jump rope.
Streetlights, race an RC car, jump rope, and even play through a remake of Super Mario Bros. 1-1 in the theater. I can see why Nintendo was tirelessly promoting this up until the game's launch. There is just so much content, so many ideas crammed into this one level. And the little things, like sitting down next to this guy on a bench and getting a moon for it as he appreciates your company, or the various Donkey Kong references spread all over due to the city's connection with Donkey Kong and Pauline, just fills the place with life, and really makes it capture the essence and craziness of the city it's inspired by, New York City. New Donk City isn't the pinnacle of Super Mario Odyssey just because of what it introduces. It's the pinnacle of Super Mario Odyssey because of how it takes advantage of everything the game has shown you thus far and combines it all together in this beautiful amalgamation of creativity and love. I will never not love opening the game just to jump around here. It truly is a masterpiece of a kingdom. Despite the overwhelming amount of praise Odyssey got and still receives today, there is one critique almost everyone has about this game, and that's the moon system. One of the biggest things Odyssey did to streamline its open-ended sandbox gameplay was remove the boot-out system that plagued 64 and Sunshine, and instead allowed players to just keep adventuring after they had found a moon, with the...
My only issue with that level personally is that the city somewhat has a realistic vibe, which feels out of place in a cartoonish world like Mario. Well, the entire theme of Odyssey is traveling, right? And the wonder of traveling, which is why we have all these different locales. I can totally understand that the vibe, that you can't vibe with it, seeing as everyone has actual human proportions. Except for Mario, and kind of Pauline too, I guess. She's more of a cartoon character than... She's almost more of a cartoon character than Mario is. But that's kind of... At least in the interviews I've been reading, that's the reasoning behind New Donk City. Just that extreme contrast and feeling of discovery and wonder you get when you're traveling.
The obvious exception of multi-moons.
Not defending.
This was obviously a great change, one of the best to the Mario Sandbox formula. But with moons not kicking you out of a level, Nintendo was able to place way more around than they would in the old games. Instead of a level having 7 or 8 stars or shines to collect, now stages had between 40 to almost 90 moons in them. Some of these moons are in well-crafted sub-areas or just good hiding places, while others are just kinda there. A lot of people believe the reason for these out-in-the-open moons existing in the first place was because Nintendo wanted you to just be able to pick up the game and play for 5 minutes and be able to collect a moon.
Yeah, that's what they
since the Switch is
literally are
portable and
saying
all.
in interviews.
And while these out-in-the-open moons have never really bothered me, I can absolutely see why people are annoyed at how lazy it feels like some of the game's moons were placed. I think there is a lot of good to come out of Odyssey's moon system, though. I mean, outside of the exploration it encourages, you also have the sub-areas. The sub-areas, especially in the post-game, is one of the most underrated aspects of Super Mario Odyssey. The game has tons of them spread all throughout each kingdom, with every one containing a fun challenge that takes advantage of one of the game's mechanics. And whether that be a capture, Mario's movement, or sheep, they are, for the most part, a ton of fun and really creative at times. Outside of the main moon each sub-area has, there is also a secret second moon that is usually found by completing a harder challenge or searching around the place.
Yeah, so
I've
much harder.
always enjoyed the sub-areas in this game. They're what I look forward to whenever I get to the post-game, just because of how creative a lot of them get. Finally, though,
think as a
before I
point,
talk
though,
about Bowser, there's
a lot
one
of the
last thing I
moons
want to
are
mention.
fun to do or find, collect, whatever. What I don't think what he's not mentioning is that a lot of the moons are placed in a way that makes you follow the main road, but then just kind of like stretch your hands out, get a moon here, get a moon there. It's all meant as, from a design perspective, it's meant to give you enough moons to go to the next part of the game as fast as possible. It seems like, I can only theorize, of course, about that, because I don't think there haven't ever been any statements specifically about that part. But at least that that is what it seems like to me. Just so that you don't have to overly explore each and every level. Of course, this is more prevalent in the earlier ones, but in the later ones you have more moons that you need to collect to move on, and at that point you need to do a bit more exploring, right? But yeah, it's more like you're guided through the level, and then you're shown different sites, and hey, maybe you want to go over there and see what's up. And that's the thing I think Odyssey does really well.
And that's the costumes. I remember when Nintendo first revealed costumes for this game, my and a lot of others' reactions to the news was just, oh, okay, that's pretty cool, but I'm probably just gonna stick to Mario's regular outfit. But when the game came out, I couldn't stop wearing different costumes due to how silly or cool a lot of them were. There's just some novelty to dressing Mario up in a cowboy hat, or clown suit, or football outfit, or nothing, and just running around and playing the game that way. Each major kingdom also has a purple coin outfit that dresses Mario in the appropriate clothing so he fits in wherever he's exploring. One of my favorite things about Odyssey's costumes, though, is the reference.
Quick question, did Super Mario Odyssey run at 60 FPS or 30 FPS? My idiotic dumb, unfortunately, can barely tell the difference between the two. Super Mario Odyssey is at a locked 60 FPS, and that was one of the main goals for the development team, to be able to have the game run just at a locked 60. Part of me thinks it's because they wanted to have Mario's fluidity of motion be much clearer. Because you can definitely tell, especially when you're running and controlling, you can definitely tell the difference between 30 and 60. It's not as easy when you're looking at footage. This might actually be... No, it's 1080p 60. But essentially, when you have a game running at 30 FPS, you're getting 30 frames per second, 30 pictures every second. And that's kind of the update frequency for the game. So when it's running at 60, it's basically running twice as fast. Not in a speed term, like Mario will still move just as fast forward as he does in 30, as he does in 60. But especially your button inputs will register much faster, double as fast, give or take. So controls feel smoother. It looks smoother to most people. Not everyone can tell the difference. And as a result, it just feels much smoother to play.
References a lot of them hold, and just how deep some of these references go. For example, in New Donk City, you can buy the Builder outfit, which is an obvious reference to Mario's appearance in Super Mario Maker. However, in the Wooded Kingdom, you can buy the Scientist outfit, which at first looks like a completely new look for Mario, but is actually a deep-cut reference to Mario's appearance in a 1994 Japanese commercial for the Super Game Boy accessory.
Oh,
I still to this day think this is one of the coolest
nostalgia
things.
bait.
Not only does Odyssey
I think
allow you
that's
to
the
dress
nicest
Mario
thing I
up
can say
and
about
have him
it.
run around in absurd outfits, the
But,
outfits themselves are
yeah, it's
callbacks
cool.
to Mario's
It's cool to have
past
to have the
that
options,
really
at
make this
least.
game feel like a celebration of Mario. More on that later though. For now, let's talk about Bowser. In Super Mario Galaxy, Bowser was the most threatening he had ever been. I absolutely loved it. The way he crashed the Star Festival.
The more I look at Super Mario Odyssey running 60 FPS, the more I wonder, why isn't Super Mario Sunshine and Mario 64 not running in 60 FPS on the 3D All-Star Collection? Good question. I wish I had a definitive answer, but it's probably... Like, knowing Nintendo, they'd probably put out a reason such as they wanted to maintain the game as it was, like the original state of the game, right? Part of me tells me it's because they were just kind of lazy and wanted to do a quick porting job, which is not what they should have done with one of their most beloved franchises. But hey, money and all
ripped
that, right?
Peach's castle up from the ground, lifted it into space, and how menacing he felt whenever you interacted with him just made Bowser feel like a real villain that you had actual motivation to defeat, and not a dad who was trying to have
they
a
also
pool party
upgraded
with his
the
son.
UI elements.
In the
like,
next, and not a dad who was trying to have a pool party with his son.
3D All-Star
In the next
Collection,
game,
and you can
Super
see
Mario
that
Galaxy 2,
by
Bowser retained some of
looking
the
at
things
the
that made him
UI
feel threatening in Galaxy 1,
and
but
text.
just didn't have the same vibe. Largely due to how much Galaxy 2 sacrificed its story and atmosphere for better gameplay. And then in 3D World, Bowser just felt goofy. I mean, yeah, it obviously fit in and worked for 3D World, but Bowser has always been at his best when he's felt like an actual threat. It's what makes finally defeating him feel so satisfying. And when I say Odyssey delivers on making Bowser feel like a threat, I mean it delivers.
No, he is just a silly boxer, dude. What do you mean? That's
Your
not
first
threatening
confrontation
at
with
all.
Bowser after he sent you flying into the air and shredded your hat into pieces takes place in the Cloud Kingdom when you catch up with his airship.
I mean, look
Here
at the
you-
fucking ship is purple with like stuff on it. It's really silly.
Battle atop the clouds.
I love the battle.
Dodging the attacks he sends your
I mean,
way.
this battle
and
is
literally
awesome.
beating him up with the hat he defeated you
Look
with
at
at the
this.
beginning of the game. If you're playing with Joy-Cons, you have the option to physically punch with them in order to deal damage to Bowser, which I've always thought was a cool little addition. After you defeat Bowser here and send him flying away, only for him to land back on his ship, he commands his cannons to fire at you. And while Mario is able to narrowly avoid a lot of them, before he's able to take off in the Odyssey, it gets hit and is destroyed by Bowser, sending Mario and Cappy plummeting down to the Lost
Oh, I
Kingdom
love
where you
how
have to
the
repair it.
game shows
Your
battle
next confrontation
scars
with
on the
Bowser
Odyssey, but
takes
he's not
place
gonna
a
mention
lot
that.
later in the
Okay.
game, when you're on your way to Bowser's Kingdom. Here, Bowser stops you while atop this giant dragon, and orders it to shoot a huge blast of purple electricity at you, in order to presumably kill Mario, considering his dialogue here, and once again destroys the Odyssey, with you having to defeat
The
that giant
Odyssey
dragon in a boss fight in order
Gets
to
it,
move
dude.
on. Your final confrontation with Bowser takes place after you defeat the Mecha Brutal and fly to the moon with the Odyssey, where Bowser is planning to marry Peach.
The Odyssey gets
I
pummeled
absolutely
in this game.
love the quiet ambience of the moon that plays once you arrive there, and the wedding bells that chime to indicate you need to hurry up and get there to crash the wedding before Bowser's able to force Peach into marrying him. After you finally make your way up to the wedding hall, you're able to burst in and stop Bowser, only to fall right into his trap.
That's such a creepy way. His hands just slowly goes behind Peach and grabs her. That's just the movement. Everything's just super creepy. Oh hey, Super Mario 64 moments, right? That's a fun reference. I think I'm gonna write that down.
This final fight is just like the one in Cloud Kingdom. However, this time the stakes are higher, Bowser is much angrier, and overall, the fight is a lot more difficult. You have to dodge his fire breath, the spiky balls he throws at you, and the fake hats. The music here is just phenomenal. It's one of my favorite Bowser themes ever. It captures the mood and atmosphere so well. And once you're finally able to push through and start punching him one last time, seeing him slam into the wall and finally be defeated is so satisfying. But it's not.
I just thought of something interesting. Despite the Nintendo Switch not being as powerful as the PlayStation 5 and or Series XS, do you think it's possible to run 3D All-Stars to run at 120 FPS on the Nintendo Switch if Nintendo tried? Well, it's emulation, right? Maybe 64? I kind of doubt they could get Sunshine, but again, who knows? Nintendo has basically access to the entirety of the Switch's hardware, right? Like the very core. I don't know if the games would run well at 120 FPS though. That's the other question. Because a lot of games break when they run too fast. Like Tales of Symphonia, if you run the PlayStation 2 version at 60 FPS, or the later remasters, it kind of breaks. I know there are fans working on a patch to run it at 60 like it did on the GameCube, but yeah.
It's not over yet.
A lot of the logic just
As a
breaks.
final demonstration of just how imaginative and creative the Odyssey team got when developing this game, the final sequence has you capture and play as Bowser.
I kind of love this sequence. This is like the highlights of Odyssey.
In this final sequence, you use Bowser's raw strength to fight your way out of the collapsing insides of the moon. You can effortlessly break walls, shoot fireballs, and jump high up in the air as the character you've gone up against for years. There's this incredibly cool 2D section that you have to go through as well, that stylizes Bowser and Peach in their original 8-bit sprites. And of course, you have the final area. The area with an entire lyrical song attached to it. This final sequence is just so cool. It makes me wish Galaxy got something like this. Shooting fireballs to destroy the pillars, and clawing at that final rock to reveal the spark pylon you need to escape, just feels absolutely marvelous every time you do it.
Yeah, this is an awesome final area or boss or whatever. Probably the best in the entire series. No matter how much I love and adore the Galaxy 2 fights. Or was that one? I don't remember. Anyways, the Galaxy fights, both are good, I think.
But, like with most Mario games, the
This is
credits
pretty,
rolling doesn't
pretty
exactly
based.
mean your adventure is
But
over.
it might be possible for
And
the
in
Switch to
Odyssey's
run
case,
games, a few
it's
games,
just the
obviously,
beginning.
at 120
Remember when I said
FPS?
this game feels like a celebration of Mario? Well, there's no other place in Odyssey that feels
I
more like
guess
a
it would depend
celebration
on the
of
game,
Mario and his
right?
legacy than the kingdom you unlock right after you beat the game. Welcome to the Mushroom
It's
Kingdom.
hard for me to say. I'm not that into the hardware side.
This entire kingdom is filled with Mario series references.
I'm not that
And whether it be the
knowledgeable.
desert far off in the distance, referencing how close a desert is to the Mushroom Kingdom because it's usually the second world in 2D Mario games. Or the Tanuki Tail tree that sits close to the castle that is an obvious callback to the exact same tree from Super Mario 3D Land. They all really bring this place to life. But there is no other Mario game that is referenced more here than the one that brought Mario to 3D in the first place. Super Mario 64. With the amount of callbacks to 64 here, the entire kingdom just feels like a beautiful love letter to that game. You got Yoshi on the castle, the jingle that plays when you drain the castle moat, jumping into paintings to rematch the bosses and hearing that iconic, the moons being retextured to stars with the classic theme playing, and of course, the entire courtyard from that game being accessible by wearing the Mario 64 outfit. It's all so cool. But the callback that really solidified my love for this kingdom is easily one of the simplest. You see, once you enter Peach's castle, you're greeted by a floor layout that is almost identical to the floor layout of the entrance from Mario 64. With the main thing missing being the doors to the other
Speaking of
rooms.
Nintendo, I never
What's
heard
not
of
missing though
what
is
the
the
fuck
sun
news
carpet on
of
the ground
Nintendo
that
adding
you looked up to
Denuvo
the
to the
roof
Switch
from
soon.
in order
Yeah,
to
they
reach the
got,
wing cap level in Mario 64. When I first reached the castle on my
have,
very first
what's
playthrough,
it-
I immediately noticed this
what
carpet
did it say?
and jokingly
They
looked
have
up just like I would in Mario 64,
approved
not
of
expecting anything.
Denuvo for
But to my surprise,
for
you are
middleware
actually
on
rewarded
Switch.
with a moon for this, which
I
is
doubt
just like,
Nintendo themselves
wow,
are gonna actually
that
implement
attention
it
to
in any
detail
other games,
is
but
absolutely
third parties
insane.
like to,
The
right?
only people who
The
would know to look
Ubisoft
up like
stuff.
that are people who've played Super Mario 64.
Denuvo sucks
So
though.
that level
I mean,
of acknowledgement for such a
The
minor
Switch is
detail
already
has
kind of
always stuck with
underpowered
me.
as it is.
I
so
don't care if
we're
it's
gonna
just my
actually get
nostalgia for
third-party
Super Mario
games
64.
with
I
Denuvo on the
absolutely
Switch,
adore
I
this
can't
kingdom.
imagine they will run.
Outside of unlocking the
like,
Mushroom Kingdom though,
good
after
at
beating
all.
the game, you not only get more moons that repopulate every kingdom you visited, even the Cloud and Ruin kingdoms in the form of the Moon Rocks, you also unlock the ability to travel to 2 additional kingdoms, given you have enough moons. At 250 moons overall, you get to travel to the dark side of the moon, where you have one final fight with all of the Brutals. First, you have to beat them all in a row in a boss rush, where you have the disadvantage of the moon gravity and the inability to gain health. Meaning, you can die incredibly easily here and have to start from the very beginning. Secondly, and finally, you have to face off against the Mecha Brutal again, however this time in moon gravity. And while the moon gravity may seem like it makes it harder, and was probably intended to do so, it actually makes it so you can easily get on top of the Mecha Brutal and defeat it in a much less difficult, but way more fun way. At 500 moons overall though, you gain access to the darker side of the moon. Yes, I know, very original naming. Here you take on what
It's
I can
like
only
Knights
describe as
2.
this game's perfect run / Champions Road equivalent. There are multiple sections that each force you to demonstrate a particular skill or set of skills you've learned along your journey. This level is difficult overall, but gets really hard at the end. And due to its length, having to start over is incredibly frustrating. And while it's not as hard as Champions Road or the Perfect Run, mostly because of how much more control you have over Mario
Perfect
compared to
Run.
those games, this is still a very hard challenge for even the most
Is-
experienced of players.
Probably awesome.
And after you're finally able to
Probably
complete
it's-
it, you
well,
get to
probably
scale up
the
a
most
replica
awesome
of
of
the
the-
New Donk City Hall,
of the
while Cappy reflects on the journey you two
post-game
have had, and a
challenges,
music
I
box
think.
rendition of the game's main theme plays, bringing an emotional end to an absolutely beautiful game. Super Mario Odyssey is an absolute masterpiece of an experience. Start to finish, first playthrough to fourth playthrough, and first speedrun attempt to 50th. This game took the foundation that 64 set and Sunshine built upon, and improved upon it in the best ways possible. You're not booted out of a level anymore. You have more incentive to explore than ever thanks to the abundance of moons and purple coins to collect. And level themes are better than
that
ever.
actually
The movement is on another
those
level,
incentives.
and is by far the
Play
best
Ratchet
movement
Clank
any
before
Mario
yet.
game. Hell, any
I tried. I bought it, downloaded it, tried playing it, and it just keeps crashing. My graphics drivers are bad, and NVIDIA doesn't know how to make good graphics drivers, I guess. It's kind of dumb. So I'm waiting for I'm waiting for a few updates to see if I can play it. But in the meantime, I have Pikmin 4 and Baldur's Gate waiting for me, so I'm probably gonna play those first. I'm gonna play through Ratchet Deadlocked pretty soon too, so it's gonna be a lot of Ratchet, or I'm gonna get my Ratchet and Clank fill from that probably. So yeah, I think having Pikmin 4 and then Baldur's Gate 3 first before I try playing Rift Apart again is gonna do me good, or is gonna make me more or less biased against that game. I mean, from what I've played so far, it's fine. A bit messy, but it's fine. But then again, I've only played like the first 2 hours or something.
Platformer
It's gonna be
has
interesting
ever
to see
had.
how it plays out.
It's not overcomplicated at first glance, so it's easily approachable to newcomers. But when you actually take the time to dig deep and understand it, you realize all the possibilities it opens up, and just how much you can do with it despite it not being the game's central focus. The actual central focus of the game, the capture mechanic, is one of the coolest mechanics in any Nintendo game. The team understood the possibilities allowed for, and gave us so many things to capture. But at the same time, it feels like there could be so much more due to how unique the idea is. Super Mario Odyssey is a game I fell in love with when it came out. It's a game that's always surprising you, always exceeding your expectations, and always reminding you that Mario will forever be one of the greatest franchises to ever grace gaming. Super Mario Odyssey is an absolute masterpiece.
Alright, so that's the end of Mario Meister's video. Chat, what do we think? I think it made some good points.
Mies, on October 20th,
He's probably the first guy I've seen actually talk about how the movement brings about a new kind of way to play the game. Instead of just following the intended path, you can just literally jump over stuff. Or skip past stuff. He also mentioned the purple coins, which I think is another thing people just don't talk about for some reason, because it does give more of an incentive, especially if you enjoy the costumes, which I think most people do, right? They give you more of an incentive to explore the levels. I played it on the PS5. Big hot. Going commando for the most part is better than Rift Apart. Yeah, Rift Apart feels overrated to me. Yeah, for some reason, a lot of people like Going Commando the best. Personally, I like the first one the best. I think it has the best feel to it. Even though you can't you can strafe, but the strafing sucks. I haven't completed Super Mario Odyssey yet, but I did enjoy most of my experience so far. Yeah, it's a good game. It's a good Mario game. People just tend to go over the top when talking about it, though. Like, it's true. A lot of the moons are fun, but there's an overabundance of moons that just there are too many. There are simply too many, and too many of them are just sitting out in the open or require you to ground pound the ground, or butt stomp the ground, whatever. And a lot of the challenges aren't very challenging. I mean, most of them are fun, but there's nothing really challenging your technical skill regarding Mario's movement. At most, I think you use I don't think you ever actually have to use the jump, dive, hat throw, dive at all. I don't think you have to use it at all in any of the challenges. I might be wrong, maybe one or two, but yeah. So they don't fully utilize Mario's movement, which is something I haven't really... I mean, he went a bit into it here with how you can skip certain parts and get places where you don't at least think you're supposed to get. But the thing I'm missing is actual challenges made around the entirety of his moveset, not skips and secret places that gives you coins. I do agree, some people go overboard in terms of praise, and Odyssey to an extent does feel overpraised, in my opinion. Yeah. Because it's Mario, right? It's either the worst thing that has ever happened or the best thing that has ever happened. The fan base is surprisingly split in the middle there. There you really see anyone say like, oh yeah, the movement is good, but I wish they did a bit more with it. And the conclusions are always it's either it's the worst Mario game or it's the best Mario game. So I think I'm gonna aim to bring a bit of a gradient to the discourse with my video, at least. Anyways, that was that. We're gonna watch one more before we end the stream, and this one is Arlo's review.
I don't really know
Of the game, which came out on launch, I think. Psychonauts and Psychonauts 2 for me are the best platformer games I've ever played in almost every category. That's interesting. I hear a lot of people speak very positively about Psychonauts, but I have never gotten around to actually playing them. Which I probably should. Which I definitely should.
Well, review copy provided by Nintendo.
So this is, let's see, double check if it actually, yep, it's there. So this one is interesting because, as I said, it came out on launch. Let's see if we can't get, yeah, 6th of December. When was the Super Mario Odyssey launch? October the 27th. So that was like 1.5 months after it launched is when Arlo published this review. You got a review copy by Nintendo too, so
No,
spent a bit of time doing that. Maybe that was
Hello,
when
my
he was
friends.
less
Arlo
known.
here, and today we're reviewing. Hey, where's my graphic? And the rest of the world.
All right, I actually watched a little bit of this. He spends a lot of time with this opening skit.
Oh no! Don't tell me.
Yep,
I'm dead.
dead as a doornail.
Oh man, it was the hype again, wasn't it? I can't even believe that. Dying of hype twice in 1 year.
Tell me
I'm
about
sure
it.
this
I need
was
to send
funny when
Nintendo
you
a
saw,
thank you
if you
card
saw
or
him
gift
dying of
basket or
hype the
something.
first time.
Well, this review is really, really important. Can I at least use that PC and recording equipment you got sitting out over there till we can get all this sorted out?
I did not mean to leave that out.
Yeah, nice kitty stickers. You starting your own YouTube channel or something?
Silence! Yes.
Hey, good on you. What kind of channel?
Cool, I'm
Mostly Let's Plays with
gonna
occasional
try and skip
vlogs and theories.
this.
But enough! In order to assuage
just
the
a couple
awkwardness
more
of the
seconds.
situation, I will grant you your request. As long as you don't complain about the motion controls the whole time.
Oh, thanks, man. I promise I won't. You are a
You
liar.
haven't played Psychonauts 1 and 2? Where's my BFG? Jokes aside, please try them whenever you get the chance. Story, characters, dialogue, level designs, theme, etc. are some of the best. Yes, so I've heard. And not a day goes by when I'm not regretting not having played Psychonauts. I don't know, it's something about the art style. It doesn't look very I mean, it doesn't make me want to play it, but I guess that's just something you have to get used to. Someday.
That's
though.
what I would have
Someday.
said to you 2 years ago if you told me we'd be getting a game like Odyssey anytime soon, or really ever. I was sure that I had Nintendo pegged. I was sure that Sandbox Mario was done for. Mario had returned to what makes a Mario game really a Mario game, pure platforming and little else, and I didn't think anything would ever change that. And I lamented the loss of the type of Mario game I preferred in my video in defense of Super Mario Sunshine. If you told me that not only would we be getting the biggest, most creative and ambitious Mario game ever conceived by a huge margin, but we would be able to play it anywhere, well, I would have looked you right in the eyes, shook my head slowly, and said, "You sicken me. You weave a wicked web of lies, and I pity you." And yet, here we are. Super Mario Odyssey was announced, and it came out, and I played it, and it still doesn't even feel real. It's like a loved one thought lost at sea years ago, found safe and sound, and stuffed with moons. I don't really know how to properly tell you about the game without spoiling too much. Not that there's anything left to be spoiled if you watched all the game's trailers, but that's a topic for another day. I'm going to do my best, though, and to be extra safe, I'm only going to be showing off footage from the first 3 kingdoms.
Yeah, did they actually
The Hat
spoil
Kingdom,
a
which is
lot
the
in
very
the
first place you
trailers?
hit and acts mostly as a tutorial. The Cascade Kingdom, which is a bigger world, but greatly
That
limits
was,
the number of
that
moons
was
you can get your
something
first time
everyone
through,
did for
making
a
it
while.
something of an extension
Just
of the
showed off
tutorial.
everything,
And the
or at
Sand
least the
Kingdom, which
very
is the
best
first
parts,
big
so that
full
when
world you can run around
the game
in.
or
Oh
movie
man,
came
where do
out,
I even
and it
start
was
with a
kind of
game like this? Where do I
everything
start with a
good was
game
already
where
shown
this
off.
is a thing? You want a review? Here's your review. Review over. Well, might as well start with the story as it sets up this whole bizarre scenario. I'm one of those rare few who really cares about having a story in a Mario game. That's another thing I talk about in that Sunshine.
Whatever you do, don't play the PlayStation versions. In fact, believe it or not, this is how I would rate the each PlayStation version: PS2 over PS3 over. Really? Well, is it because of the? Is it because of emulation or something? Because they might just be emulating it for every console after the PS2. In which case, yeah. But isn't yeah, Psychonauts, yeah, I get it. But isn't Psychonauts on Steam? Psychonauts. Yeah, Psychonauts is on Steam, and I have it in my library actually. the first game at least. Yeah, I really just don't have any excuse not to play that.
I fully understand that Mario doesn't need a super deep and involved story, but I need enough of one to make the game more interesting. I'm a big feel guy. I want a game to feel cool. Bowser grabbing Peach and running away for the millionth time and that's it is not cool. It doesn't feel like anything. I have no motivation beyond, this is a Mario game. Shut up and play it. And I know every Mario story really boils down to Bowser kidnapping Peach, but throwing in some extra elements makes all the difference. Mario is vacationing on an island where some weird shadow version of himself is wreaking havoc and making a mess, so in addition to gathering up all the shines, you're tasked by the people there with, quote, cleaning up the place. Bowser kidnaps Peach and takes a spaceship to the center of the universe to create his own galaxy, and on the way there, you learn the backstory of the mysterious space-traveling woman who aids you on your quest. That's motivation, that's creativity, that's feel. It's what I crave when I'm stomping Goombas and trying to go rescue Peach. Going into Odyssey, I knew the basic premise, but I didn't know how it would ultimately be executed. I'm extremely pleased to say, though, the game delivers exactly what I hope for in a Mario game. And a quick note, if you consider the opening cinematic a spoiler, you might want to skip ahead a few minutes, but it's pretty short, and again, there's nothing in it that Nintendo didn't show in the
Dude,
trailer.
this is like
I love the opening because it
month,
doesn't start the
more
way
than
the
a
other
full
games
month
do.
since
It doesn't start with
release.
Mario sleeping on a log, and a toad comes
Why would
along and gives him a
people
letter
not
from
be-
Peach
why
inviting him
would
to eat
people
some
care
cake at
about
the castle, and
spoilers
just
for the
before he
opening
gets
and
there,
watch-
oh no,
and
Bowser
watch this
crashes the
video.
party and grabs
It's
Peach
40
and takes
minutes
off with
long.
her.
It's
And you gotta
pretty
give
clear
chase.
it's gonna cover
No, it
most
starts
of
you
the game,
in the
right?
middle of the action. You're already on Bowser's
not in
airship,
depth,
already
but
facing him down.
at least
Seeing his get up and
superficially.
hearing one or two lines of dialogue lets you know he plans to marry Peach. This right here might seem like a small detail, but in a way I feel like the sudden start sets the tone for the rest of the game. It says, this Mario game is a little different. We're doing away with some of the fluff and rethinking the way things should play out. We don't need to see all that stuff leading up to this scene. We all know how it goes. Let's just start where things get interesting. So Bowser just completely messes up Mario's day and sends him plummeting to the land below, his famous red cap in tatters. He wakes up in a weird place and falls in with one of the resident ghosty McHat faces. This guy, Cappy, wants to help you out so he can save his sister, who Bowser just snaps snatched to use as Peach's wedding tiara. And while I'll talk more about the visual aspect later, I want to emphasize once again how the game establishes a tone
I love
right at
this
the beginning.
cutscene because you can, if you look at Peach's
Bowser just
body
snatched to
language,
use
it's like
as Peach's
almost
wedding tiara.
stretching.
And while I'll
towards the
talk more about the
tiara.
visual aspect later, I
Looks
want to
like, "Oh, I
emphasize
really wanna
once
wear
again
that."
how the game establishes a tone right at the beginning of the story. Think first area in a Mario game. What are you imagining? Probably green.
The animated cutscenes in Super Mario Odyssey still hold up even today. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, they do. They definitely do.
Grass,
Really pretty.
hills, sunny sky, maybe some Goombas hanging around, something a little more plain and Mario-like to start the player at ground level and work up to the more interesting stuff from there. Well, look at Odyssey's starting area. Whites and blacks and grays, top hats, ghosts, the moon, an ocean of mist surrounded by a distant city. What a bizarre place to start a Mario game. And once again, this says something. This says, what formula? This Mario game is whatever it wants to be. This Mario game is full of surprises. After this point, you find an airship of your own and move from kingdom to kingdom, gathering up enough power moons to finally catch up with Bowser. Again, yes, this is just Bowser kidnapping Peach and you chasing him, but it keeps you engaged throughout the game. Bowser's got business in each kingdom, motivating you to travel to each one. There are encounters and story beats that happen between kingdoms. And this is how you have a great story in a Mario game, even if it's the same story. There's nothing worse than a game just being one straight shot to the end. Even with non-Mario games, I just hate it when everything gets set up and every level is just an obstacle on your way to the end encounter, leaving you with a story that's essentially a beginning and an end with literally no middle. That was a big problem with Sticker Star, in fact. It wasn't just that the story was generic, it was that nothing interesting happened plot-wise on your way to the end. But Odyssey serves as a perfect example of how Bowser kidnapping Peach can be entertaining no matter how many times we go through it, as long as some care is given to making it interesting. Plus, to cap it all off, no pun intended, the entire ending sequence is far and away the best ending to any non-RPG Mario. I don't want to hype it up too much, but I thought it was just phenomenal. It made me laugh out loud multiple times, and in fact, the game overall is just packed with humor. For a few of these gags and witticisms, we're talking Paper Mario levels of funny. One thing that really aids in the storytelling, naturally, is the game's cutscenes. Mario games are always animated very well, but Odyssey is on another level in this regard. Animations are natural and fluid, the characters are very expressive, and most obviously, the game was given more of a cinematic flair. Again, this is obvious from the very first cutscene. It's just so much fun to watch. The visuals in general are really stellar. I mean, what do you expect? This is Mario. Is there any other series that Nintendo polishes like they polish Mario? Starting in the Cap Kingdom didn't just set the mood for the game, it also served as a way to showcase the game's graphics, or rather, not showcase them. See, the first cutscene looks great, but once gameplay starts, you're in this place that's designed wonderfully from an artistic perspective, no doubt, but not much of it impresses on a technical level. The colors are muted, there isn't a whole lot of texturing to admire, it's pretty simple. Pleasant, but simple. I believe that this was purposeful, because once you leave, you're smacked right in the face with the Cascade Kingdom, and you really realize how gorgeous the game is. Colors are vibrant, textures are sharp. I mean, look at the scuffed up shine on this chain chump, or the skin on this T-Rex. Ah, I love it. Basically, any character or baddie you meet features such intricate little details that make them come alive. It's funny because these are all essentially cartoon characters, but when they're made...
In terms of screenwriting and body movements in Super Mario Odyssey, cutscenes are indeed well done. Yeah, they're really well done. I love it.
To move this fluidly, and they're covered in textures that look so genuine you think you could reach out and feel them. They seem real, like they're not
even
just
like
characters. Games like Super Mario 3D World and Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle look really nice, but the characters are given a shiny, plasticky sheen that makes them look like toys, which is pleasant in its own sort of way, but I vastly prefer the more realistic shading and rendering in Odyssey. It's like Nintendo has been experimenting with how to make a cartoony series like Mario more graphically impressive for quite a while now. How do you make a cartoon look better without just making it shinier and smoother? Well, if you ask me, they've arrived. This is perfection, and beyond finer environmental details like grass and particle effects and whatnot, it's hard to imagine a Mario game looking much better than this. And it ain't just pure graphical power, of course. This game is a work of art. I want so badly to go on and on about all the kingdoms and how insanely creative and visually spectacular some of them are, and yeah, I know you've probably seen them all anyway in the trailers, but I'll contain myself. We'll stick to the first three, but let me just tell you, there's some incredible stuff in this game. One thing I loved about Sunshine was that Isle Delfino felt like a real place, and in the background you could always see some other part of the island. Then of course you'd have special levels with bizarro backgrounds just to change things up. I love the island, though. I love having a sense of place. Being grounded in that way allows for greater feelings of awe and mystery. Look at the style of 3D World and 3D Land as an example of something I'm less interested in, where every level is a Bizarro level. Just a collection of platforms floating above an endless expanse of nothing with random geometric shapes in the background.
It's
no one
visually
lives in
interesting,
these
but
places.
it's not
They really
very-
just exist so you can jump around on them.
I don't
Galaxy
know.
kind of straddles the line.
Just
You
feels
can
like a
always see
game
other
all the
galaxies
time.
and stars and stuff in the background, which is certainly fun. It makes me wonder what I might find if I could fly to those other places. However, most of the levels in those games are still just collections of stuff to jump around on. The Honey Hive Galaxy is about the closest thing to a real place with real inhabitants that you'll get. Usually when you meet NPCs, they're just sort of hanging around on platforms or tiny planetoids, and it's like, do you live here? Where do
Don't keep
you
us
sleep?
hanging.
How do you get
What was
food?
the
But
skip,
Odyssey,
small
once
lad
again,
fan?
is everything I could have wanted in this regard. Nearly every kingdom has a race of
I really
inhabitants
need
that
to go back and finish Super Mario Sunshine. Well, you don't really need to do that. I mean, it's the worst. It's the worst 3D Mario game, I think, at least.
really and truly live there. They have houses.
But hey,
you can talk
it's
to
fun
them.
enough,
Their
right?
worlds are
A lot
actually
of the
affected by
movement is
Bowser's actions.
pretty fun.
These
It's
places
just
have
that-
a reason for being other than so Mario
Well,
can
as a
jump on
whole,
them. And that sense of reality
it's
motivates
not-
me to move forward, and like I said,
It's kinda
deepens
more
the sense of
frustrating than
mystery I
it's fun.
feel. It gets me wondering more than ever about the stuff I find. It gets me wondering what's beyond the world I can interact with. And so much of this is thanks to the game's backgrounds. Most kingdoms are surrounded by gorgeous scenery. Just look at what I am showing you on the screen right now. Look at that! Is this a Mario game I'm playing? Then look at the Cap Kingdom, surrounded by a gigantic city, presumably inhabited by the Hattie
Do
McSpook
any
floats.
people
My
have
gosh,
Google
it's
Photos?
enormous. How many people live there?
You could
What's their
tweet it at
society
me.
like? And is that the Cascade
wanted
Kingdom
to.
hanging out below the moon? How the heck does that work? What's it like in the space between them? And the cool thing is that, yeah, just like with Sunshine, you'll still find a ton of special, smaller, self-contained stages that can be anything they want visually. Many of them are indeed bizarro collections of platforms out in nowhere land, but so many of them still have some link to reality, or at least contain some visual detail that makes them more interesting.
just
You'll see
looks like
cool
an
stuff in the
unfinished
background, and instead of
obstacle
simply
course.
saying, I am nowhere, and getting on with your day, you'll say, where am I?
Oh, yeah,
Between the
okay.
backgrounds and
Yeah,
the music and the game's use of color and
completing
lighting,
Sunshine
Odyssey
is
often
just
works to establish, surely
kinda
you can't be serious.
madness
Atmosphere
incarnate.
in a Mario game? That's right. Everything isn't
call
just
you
bright and
crazy if
bubbly
you-
and goofy. It's never downright dire.
Well,
or
maybe
anything,
maybe
but
not.
so many areas
maybe
can be
not
a
call
little
you crazy
eerie, a
if
little
you decide
weird,
to
or
finish
really
it,
just
But if you did it multiple
atmospheric.
times, then
Even an otherwise
yeah.
normal area can have a whole different feel just because the sun is setting. And it's these little details that make the game so engrossing.
I think everyone should
that make it consistently
100%
enjoyable
Odyssey
to just
at
be
least
in.
just
if
once.
pure gameplay was the main reason to be in
Just
Mario's
to-
world in the
just
past,
to
now
know
taking in the
how
environments
to
is half the
not
fun. They truly are
make
magical.
a,
And while we're still
collectathon
talking about visuals, we might as well touch on performance.
Game.
The game runs at a solid 60 FPS, making every
those
motion
blue
very
coins,
smooth.
man. Whew.
The downside to that, though, is that the resolution is less smooth. The game tops out at 900p when docked, and this of course means a decent amount of rough edges. Much like other first-party Switch titles, it uses dynamic resolution scaling to keep the frame rate consistent, but it's much more noticeable in Odyssey than it was in, say, Splatoon. In busier places, NPCs in the distance use fewer frames of animation before they pop out of existence. You'll see little bits of the world get a little wonky on occasion if you're looking closely enough. The most obvious scaling happens when you move the camera around. Instead of using motion blur as a cinematic element, the game's version of motion blur is really just more downscaling. As in, you're not looking at a blur effect, but a lower resolution image, presumably to make up for the fact that the world
harsh.
around you has to load more quickly with fast camera motions.
Honestly,
Sometimes
never
I see it
really,
happening pretty
noticed
clearly,
the,
but most of the time I
downscaling,
don't notice.
resolution
It's really
downscaling,
impressive
but-
how the game can adapt so quickly and find so many little corners to cut to keep the action running smoothly, though I do wish we had an option to favor either frame rate or resolution, as many other games have. If we're talking shooters like Splatoon, then yeah, give me 60 FPS, no doubt. But with a 3D platformer, I really don't think the frame rate does anything for my accuracy. It looks nice, sure,
What?
but it would look even nicer
No,
with smooth
Arlo,
edges and
come on.
minimal jaggies.
60
The world is so
FPS is
beautiful,
like
I would
a
much
core
prefer a
part of
crisp
the Odyssey
1080p
experience.
image running at 30 FPS. But hey,
It's
that's
the
just
reason
me,
why
and I know
everything
I'm in
feels
the
so
minority
smooth.
here.
And especially
Surely, though,
that
by
the
now you're
frame rate
asking
is
the big
stable.
question. How do
That's like
it
the
go?
biggest-
How's the gameplay
that's
and
like
all
the
that
most
jumping
important
around we've been
aspect of
talking
the
about?
of
Well,
the
let's start
frame
with the
rate.
basics. If you played Super Mario 64, you know more or less what to expect. You can crouch, backflip, wall jump, ground pound, sideways somersault, long jump, and
Speaking
triple
of
jump.
completing, I wouldn't recommend completing Psychonauts 1. Finishing it, absolutely. Completing it, not so much. Oh, well, then you know I'm going to then you know I'm going to complete it, right? Definitely, 100%.
Just like the good old days. Though some of the
I'll
moves
even
have a
post
feel unique to Odyssey. You might
completion
remember me
percentage
saying in
on
my
Twitter
first
when I
impressions
do.
video that triple jumping is much easier than it's ever been. It
It's
no longer
probably gonna be a
requires
year
such
from now-
precise
from
timing
now,
and
but
alignment to pull off, which
hey.
makes it much more usable.
Someday-
One casualty
someday
this time
I
around,
will
though, is
complete
the
it.
sideways somersault. There have always been a number of ways to jump higher than you can with a normal jump, be it a sideways somersault, a triple jump, or a backflip, but the sideways somersault has always been my favorite. It doesn't require the space and the timing of the triple jump, and it keeps your momentum versus the backflip, which requires you to stop and line up the shot. You just start moving away from the platform, and boom, you're launching yourself up. It's always just felt really good. However, this time, for whatever reason, I feel like they made it harder to pull off consistently. I just can't do it with the casual ease I'm used to. It's not super hard or anything.
Also when it comes to the resolution scaling, I think Arlo is playing like a pretty early version of Odyssey. It's probably has gotten some updates since then. So I think the resolution scaling is better in later versions, if I'm not completely wrong.
But even just that extra little bit of difficulty means I can't rely on it a lot, or else I'm gonna miss a bunch of jumps. Fortunately, the game introduces a new type of high jump where you jump coming out of a ground pound to get some extra air, and this provides a nice sort of middle ground. It's slower than the sideways somersault, but not as momentum halting as the backflip. It's a nice addition to Mario's moveset, truth be told. I'm definitely glad it's there. Another addition is the roll. Technically, this was used in 3D Land and 3D World, but this time you can roll continuously, and it's a relatively simple addition that makes moving Mario around a lot more fun. There's just something very satisfying about gaining some extra speed by rolling down a hill, or better yet, a series of hills. You know Mario doesn't just jump and tumble in this game though. Hit the Y button and you'll throw Cappy, and this is where things get interesting. First off, this is your main mode of interacting with the world. You chuck him around and he hooks onto stuff to varying effect. Turning on lights, pushing stuff around, repelling projectiles. Cappy can be used to break stuff, and you can even hold down the button to keep him hovering for a few seconds, causing continuous damage. More interesting though is how he enhances your ability to move around. Throwing him while in midair will give you just a little extra airtime, much like the spin move in Super Mario Galaxy. It's not nearly as challenge removing as the spin was. It's really just a tiny bit of movement, but I'm still so thankful for it. I don't want the game to play itself for me, and precise platforming is part of the whole challenge, but that little inch of forgiveness makes the whole experience so much more enjoyable and smooth. There's a lot more though. Run into Cappy while he's hovering and you'll get launched higher than a regular jump. It's still not the perfect solution to a more finicky sideways somersault, seeing as if you're too close to a wall, Mario won't throw him, but it's another move that certainly helps. Then you can throw him out into the open air and bounce on top of him to gain some extra distance, though landing that bounce can be trickier than it looks. If you ground pound but press Y before you start to fall, you vault forward, much like Mario did in 64 and Sunshine when you jumped and hit B. You don't gain a ton of horizontal distance and you fall at a very severe angle, but it's another bit of wiggle room that I'm extremely thankful for. You're no longer such a slave to gravity. If you don't line up your jump perfectly, there are now ways you can turn things around. Then string all these moves together, and Mario's more mobile than he's been since he had the flood strapped to his back. You can throw Cappy basically at any time, and if you dive into him, you'll get an extra bounce, as you would expect. So after playing around for a while, you discover that you've got the ability to move insanely long horizontal distances. At least insanely long compared to most past games where you had the long jump, and that was that. Here, you can long jump, throw Cappy, dive into him and bounce, throw him again, then dive again, all in one move. Now, I could easily see a Mario veteran hearing all this and thinking, wow, looks like they removed all the challenge, giving Mario all these moves, letting him jump so far, they might as well make him fly. The thing is, though, these new moves are tools. They're not free passes. They don't make the game easier. In fact, you've got to still be good at thinking on your feet, as they often require split-second timing to pull off. I still haven't mastered the controls. I still forget to use certain moves and fail to execute a lot of the ones I try. It's a system that offers more options and interactions than Mario's ever had, thus a relatively complicated one, and instead of making up for bad playing, it rewards those willing to master it with fewer deaths and more fluid
you're going to have more fun.
It's without a doubt the deepest moveset we've seen in a Mario game. It benefits tremendously from practice and experimentation. Cappy's got a few more things he can do, but we're going to hold off on talking about that until later and instead move on to your objective. Instead of stars or shine sprites or flagpoles, Odyssey sees you collecting power moons. And of course, the game returns to the more open sandbox style of 64 and Sunshine versus the linear get-to-the-goal style we saw in Mario's of the last decade. The difference here is that there's a greater emphasis than ever on that sandbox element, and there are a million moons. Instead of entering a stage with a specific moon in mind, with the stage often changing based on which one you're after, the moons are all available to you, with a few exceptions, and you don't get booted out of the level when you grab one. This is the first truly open Mario experience ever created, and that sense of freedom is exhilarating. These worlds are just jam, stinking, packed with stuff to do and find.
I know this has been said repeatedly by a lot of people, but still, the movement and controls of Super Mario Odyssey are some of the best in any 3D platformer game. Yeah, I 100% agree. But like I've also
so many moons versus
said,
120 or whatever was a genius stroke of game design.
It doesn't feel like they
because
are
it means that you're always
utilizing
finding
them
something
for
useful. The fact that there are a
lot of
million
the
moons
challenges.
should, in
Which
theory,
is a
make
shame.
each one less valuable than a star
Because
or a shine sprite,
I
but it
think
doesn't
the
feel that way, at
movement
least not to
sets
me.
that
I
Odyssey
get moons
has
constantly, and
has a
every
lot
single
of
one
potential
feels
for some
great.
great
Mini
challenging,
games, hidden secrets, item fetching, it doesn't matter one
some
lick
great
what it
hard
is.
challenges.
If it nets me a moon, I'm happy to have done it. Lots of moons are barely hidden at all and take little to no
And
effort
it's
to get
kinda
beyond
annoying
just
to
finding
just
them, but
run
I
through
still
the
get
entire
that tiny
game
little
and
rush when I pick them
feel
up.
like you're
If nabbing a star
over-equipped
in the
for
other
most of
games
the
was
stuff there.
satisfying, then this is that feeling times 5 or 6 or 7. I don't even know how many moons there are. I've got 500 and there are some worlds I've barely touched. Even better though, these moons aren't just satisfying to earn, they're fun to earn. See, back in my day, 100%ing a Mario game meant doing all the challenges that were fun, then slowly grinding through all the tedious ones, hopefully reaching the end before realizing your time is more
Sunshine
important
is
than
an
that and
extreme
quitting out of
example
frustration.
of that, though.
Collecting 100 coins in a level where one tiny mistake means starting all over, hunting down a preposterous number of blue coins, each with an annoying timed hide-and-seek thing to go with it, floating down an impossible river of poison for the rest of your life because it's impossible. I love 64 and Sunshine,
just
but
walk
not
in
all of their
sights.
challenges were
Hours.
designed with fun in mind. The Galaxy games were certainly better in this regard. The levels being mostly linear platforming affairs meant you were never forced to do anything too tedious or time-consuming, though there were plenty of Trickster Comet levels I just didn't feel like dealing with and put off as long as I could. Odyssey, on the other hand, is always a joy to play. Nintendo focused so hard on filling the game with challenges that were first and foremost fun that you're talking about a game that's basically all highs and no lows. Now, as I said, I haven't gotten every moon, far from it, and for all I know, there are some that are completely unfair and take way too much time to get, but it says something when a guy can get 500 of them without finding any of them unpleasant. So far, there have been no
Unpleasant,
long
no,
sequences
but
where
I
messing
think-
up
I
and
don't
starting
think
all
there's
over. There have been no grueling
any unpleasant
collectathons.
moons,
There have
like
been no
straight up
levels that were so
unpleasant.
hard I threw up my hands and
But
called it
there are
quits.
some boring
I've come
ones.
upon some that were hard, definitely, and there are some as of yet unfinished ones that are so hard I've been working up the courage to try them again, but we're talking hard here, not unfair, not tedious, not something that wastes your time or just wants to kill you stupidly for the sake of keeping you away from that precious game completion a little longer. If I have a hard time with a challenge, it's because it requires more skill, more practice, and a better understanding of how it should be done. And when I finally conquer that
Sunshine's
challenge, I feel
defense,
nothing but
just because it's terrible to complete doesn't mean that it's a terrible game to play as a whole. No, it's not. It has its moments, right? But the combination of the controls being very jittery, like if you barely touch the control stick, Mario just flies in that direction. And then having to complete episode 7 of every single stage to get to the last boss, just, I don't know. It kind of locks you in place in ways that 64 and Galaxy and even Odyssey doesn't.
a great feeling of pride and accomplishment. On the subject of difficulty as a whole, Odyssey strikes a pretty good balance. I will say that most of the time it does lean on the easy side, and there were times in my initial run-through when some sort of challenge was so fun that I wished it was a little harder. Much of the first chunk of moons you need to beat the game can be breezed through without too much difficulty. However, that's not to say that there weren't a few things I had to try a good number of times. As you'd expect, the smaller secret levels are generally where you'll be challenged the most, as they're usually focused on that pure platforming that Galaxy and 3D World fans will appreciate. These don't offer checkpoints, so a fall does mean starting all over, but they're never so long that it's a big problem. Up in the kingdom proper, moons are generally easier to get, though simply finding them all is sort of the challenge. Figuring out how to get a moon can be its own kind of hard. One great thing is that if you get really stuck hunting for those last few moons, you can get a hint from this guy for 50 coins, or for free from this robot if you've got some amiibo lying around. This isn't like Skyward Sword though, where the game literally shows you a video of exactly where a thing is and how to get it. It marks the moon's location on your map, but if you've already grabbed all the obvious moons, chances are that the hint is gonna be just that, a hint. It'll point you in the right direction, but in most cases, I still found myself having to figure out what to do. It's a system that can offer help to younger players if they should want it for earlier moons, and at the same time it can nudge more experienced ones in the right direction while they're doing cleanup so they don't have to spend an eternity running around getting nowhere or give up and look up an explicit answer online. The game caters to different experience levels even further by offering what it calls assist mode, which points to objectives and bounces Mario back if he falls. Some will lament that such a mode exists and that my 3-year-old nephew should simply get
love
good,
how it says
but I think it's a
assist
great
mode
option that opens the game up to players
in the
that might
lower
otherwise
right
not
corner.
be fit to handle it. So let's back up
It's
a little
just-
bit. Do you
it's just
remember
a
earlier when I said you
stupid
could
way
buy
of
hints with
handling
coins?
it because
Yeah,
you'll always
you did hear
be
me right. This
reminded
is a
that
Mario
this is
game,
assist mode.
a platformy
This
one,
isn't the
not an
real game you're
RPG
playing.
one, where you can buy stuff.
Look at how
with your
bad you
coins.
are
They're
in
no longer
Mario
just
Odyssey.
something to collect 100 of to earn an extra life. In fact, forget about lives entirely. They ain't in this game. If there's something that really makes you realize how deeply they pondered the Mario formula here, it's getting rid of lives. Lives make little sense in modern Mario, and I say good riddance. Now when you die, you lose coins. Pretty funny turn of events if you ask me. And compared to lives, this feels like an actual punishment for losing. It's a very real motivation to not die. Every time I see that coin
I
counter
don't
go
know,
down,
you get
I
so
wince
many
a little.
coins in
That's
Odyssey
because
that-
coins
yeah.
can be used to buy a number of things. Mainly you've got costumes, and going
It's
in, I
pretty
really didn't think I would
inconsequential
care about these,
at a
but
point.
before I knew it, I was proudly sporting some silly outfit and saving
And
up
also
to get
they're
more.
only used
Changing
for
Mario's look just
optional
does a lot more to keep things fun
clothes.
and interesting than I expected.
It's not like
Though
the
I
purple
will
coin
say that it
set
would have been nice
where
if
you
some
buy
of these
clothes you
outfits
can get
provided
moons for.
even tiny bonuses. Slight environmental resistances, minor adjustments to your moveset or how enemies interact with you, that sort of thing. As it is, they can get you some moons, but beyond that, they don't really do anything themselves. They're just kind of fun. Coins can also be used to buy temporary heart extensions, which are handy if you're going into a tricky boss battle, and most importantly, you can use them to buy moons. So, hey, that's all the incentive you need right there. Arlos love collecting money and buying stuff, so the fact that this has been introduced into a Mario game is just a dream come true. It's never been more fun and satisfying to collect coins. It's no longer something that's enjoyable almost entirely because it makes a sparkle and a fun little bling sound. In addition to regular old coins, most kingdoms have a unique currency that can be used to buy kingdom-specific items in the shop. Within a world, there are always exactly the right number of these you need to buy all the unique items, which include costumes and both stickers and souvenirs that decorate your ship, the Odyssey. Having a limited number of these special coins with a very clear indication of how many you've gotten and how many are left makes them yet another fun thing to hunt down. The stuff they buy is all optional, purely for collectors, or at least almost purely for collectors, but hey, no spoilers here. So once again, I went in thinking I wouldn't care, but now I'm way into getting it all. Seeing as the game looked so big and was focusing
Oh yeah,
so
it's
much on
almost
exploration, I think I expected more stuff to collect overall, though the designers chose to have these coins pretty much be the extent of what you collect outside of moons. Instead of finding all sorts of stuff out in the world, you just find these special coins, which in turn buy all the collectibles. And there's a part of me that was hoping for a little more, maybe hoping to sometimes find something completely unexpected, but I can't deny that this is a cleaner and more streamlined way of doing it. Plus, I guess I'd rather have that thrill of finding the last few coins I need to buy a hat rather than just finding the hat up in a tree because, well, that's the fun, making me run around all over the place. And speaking of running around all over the place, I'm so good at segues. I'm like a pro. Let's talk a little about hub worlds. As we found out some time ago, there ain't one. Naturally, Odyssey having a hub world was something I was hoping for, as I loved the ones in both 64 and Sunshine, but the game looked so good that the bad news wasn't too bad at all. And I just want to tell you now
Basically, every
how
kingdom
after
is a
playing
hub
the
world,
game,
if you
it
think about
even
it.
more doesn't matter than
Right?
I thought it would doesn't matter. I really had to explore these big worlds for myself to put together why that is. See, I loved Peach's Castle and Isle Delfino for 3 reasons. 1, they were like big playgrounds for me to run around in between levels, just something to have some silly fun with. 2, they offered the most in terms of exploration. The hub was where you found all the levels and most of the secrets. 3, they acted as something
he's
of a
actually gonna
creative
say that, isn't
nexus
he?
for all the levels to connect to, making the world feel like more of a real place rather than just a collection of isolated levels. Most of Odyssey's worlds meet every one of these criteria. They're big and filled with stuff to play around with, they're obviously overflowing with secrets, and they already feel so real that I don't need them to be connected to each other. I generally don't like choosing levels on a world map because it makes the game seem less like another world and more like a game. But despite the fact that you can't even call what Odyssey has a world map because it's really just a list, it doesn't feel like I'm picking from a collection of levels. It feels like I'm picking regions on a great big awesome planet. They're so substantial and
That's
creative that
exactly
it would
what you're
almost
doing.
feel wrong trying to staple them to each other just for the sake of having a hub world. So yeah, no problems there is what I'm trying to say. So that brings us to Odyssey's biggest strengths. I've already gone on about how creative it is, but I really can't stress it enough. Odyssey is just bursting with creativity and charm. No other Mario game has ever come close to this level. And that's something I really value in a game. It's the reason Thousand Year Door is one of my
Well,
favorite games of
okay,
all
so if
time.
you're gonna-
All the weird,
if you're gonna
interesting
include the
environments
Paper
and
Mario
races and
titles,
scenarios.
then I have
When
to
you take
disagree.
another step back, Linear Mario versus Sandbox Mario
yes,
isn't
of
just
course.
a matter of pure platforming versus exploration, but it's also sort of like design versus imagination. The technical aspect of creating and mapping out a gameplay challenge versus dreaming up stuff that would just be cool to do and see. Both can be important parts of game design, but different games prioritize the two differently, and Odyssey leans more on that latter side to a degree that I never could have hoped for. When I look at the game, I don't just see a bunch of guys hunched over their computers, writing code and tweaking platform distances. I see people sitting around a table, bouncing around ideas, drawing, letting their imaginations run wild. I mean, you can beat a T-Rex for Pete's sake. If that doesn't say creativity, nothing in this great big world does. Then, to reference my Sunshine video one more time, there's another reason I love that game significantly more than Galaxy and 3D World, and that's gameplay variety. I think the Galaxy games in particular are technically superior games. They're more focused and consistent and just better from a game design standpoint. Yet I find myself returning to 64 and Sunshine way more often because of the wide range of stuff the games have me do. Instead of just getting to the end of the path and maybe beating a boss, you've got to find something, or solve a puzzle, or gather stuff, or just anything. Even if some of the challenges are less well designed than others, I still find myself more engaged. It's just the way my brain works. I crave differing objectives. It's more stimulating to me.
What
And
would
as
be
you could
your
probably
least
tell from
favorite to
everything
most
else.
favorite? Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, Galaxy, and Odyssey. Wow, that's a good question. I'm finding a lot of renewed love from Odyssey while I'm replaying it. I'm seeing a lot of stuff I didn't see during my first playthrough, because I haven't played this game since I first played through it in 2017. But I mean, it's hard. I'd guess Super Mario Sunshine and 64 are at the bottom. I think Sunshine does a lot of cool stuff with its movement, with FLUDD and stuff, but at the same time, the controls just aren't quite up to par. They're a bit too... I don't know how to explain it, but they're a bit too fast for me. Like, there's not really a lot of opportunity to go slow. It's a bit too snappy. Yeah, a bit, which is a really weird way to describe the controls of a 3D platform, because they're supposed to be snappy, but there's something about Sunshine that it feels too snappy, and FLUDD feels like it's placed there to directly contradict that, or to make you slow down a bit. So I'd probably say Sunshine at the bottom, then 64, then probably Galaxy 1, then Odyssey, and then Galaxy 2. Yeah, I think that's it. That's the list. Because I think Galaxy 1 does a lot of good things. It does a lot of things that doesn't fit with the core gameplay of the game. Like a lot of those big open levels doesn't fit with the control scheme and Mario's movements, which makes them really boring. And I think Galaxy 2 does everything Galaxy 1 does, except better. And then Odyssey, I think I'm placing it between the two Galaxy games, with Galaxy 2 on top.
As I've said, Odyssey sets the bar high above any other Mario as far as variety goes. Part of that is thanks to the design of the worlds themselves. There are just so many moons and so many different ways to get them. But the biggest thing is the ability that I haven't even really touched on yet.
Movement, though,
Odyssey already wins the Best Mario Ever award purely because of all that other stuff, but putting the capture ability on top of it all, it's the icing on the cake. It's the meat on the sandwich. It takes a really great game and turns it into something truly remarkable. And that's of course because of the variety it adds. There are so many different baddies and even objects to capture, and each one has its own way of interacting with the world. And thanks to that Nintendo bankroll that says, we've got the money to polish this sucker until every piece of it is fun, nearly every capture is enjoyable to control. Lots of games have this problem where even if the main character controls alright, vehicles and transformations end up being nothing but frustrating. Take Yooka-Laylee for example. Making it feel good to run around with a character takes a lot of time and tweaking, so introducing other forms of movement often results in a wide assortment of inferior experiences. But just about none of Mario's captures are difficult or frustrating to control. Most of them have certain weaknesses and limitations, sure, but that's where the challenge lies, overcoming these limitations in order to utilize their unique strengths. And the same goes for vehicles. The Jaxi in the Sand Kingdom will send you flying off the edge of the world with great ease, and it's not great at making sharp turns, but it's blazing fast and can get you across the desert in no time flat. The controls are difficult to master, but they're responsive and intuitive, thus making falls feel completely fair. There's only one single thing that I thought had wonky controls, but it's from a later kingdom, so I won't talk about it here. It's really just the one, though, and it's not even the worst thing in the world or anything. It just has a weird element that makes it harder than it should be to operate. So now, unfortunately, to use another food analogy, we come to the fly in the soup, motion controls. You'll remember from my first impressions video that I was pretty uneasy about them, and while in the end they don't break the game by any means, they're a very big disappointment.
Odyssey yet.
Let me take you through it.
So
you can either press Y or
change
shake your Joy-Con or Pro Controller to throw Cappy.
Again.
You can shake again to have him home in on the nearest object, which helps people with subpar aim like me. However, there's no button equivalent for homing. You can shake to home, but you can't press to home. This is baffling. Furthermore, you can fling whatever you're holding up to throw Cappy up in the air or down to throw him down. These actions also have no direct button equivalents. You can ground pound, then hit Y to make Mario throw Cappy downward in that same vertical-oriented way, but this only works when you're standing on a ledge. You can't use it to actually throw Cappy down while in midair, rendering it fairly useless. Then throwing it upward, forget it. There isn't even a halfway alternative. Then you've got the spin attack, which is really useful for taking out lots of little guys or collecting circles of coins. You do it by swinging whatever controller you're using like a doofus to one side or the other. If you're not into swinging around though, then the only way to make it happen is to stop and twirl the control stick around until Mario starts to spin, then press Y. Yes, so technically this is an entirely non-motion controlled way to spin, but it takes so much longer and is so much more awkward to pull off that it's not worth it most of the time. But in cases like this, where you need to grab multiple things without stopping, swinging the controller is the only option that works. Lastly, there are a few captures that require Waggle to perform their best. The examples that will probably come up the most are frogs and Goombas, where you've got to swing upward to make them jump higher.
Yeah, that too.
None of this would be so bad if the Switch was purely a home console. I used motion controls in Super Mario Galaxy, and they were fine. I got used to shaking the remote to do a spin attack and pointing at the screen to grab star bits and pull stuff around. I was always positioned in front of the TV anyway, and it didn't matter how I sat with my remote as long as I could find the sensor bar because I never had to shake in a specific direction. But this isn't the Wii. This is the Switch, and Nintendo's whole thing with the Switch is providing gamers with options. The system allows you to play however you want with whatever controller you want. But when you're playing Odyssey in handheld mode, you are at a disadvantage. It's one thing to shake a detached Joy-Con or even a Pro Controller, but shaking the Switch itself feels awful. Aiming is no problem. Gyro aiming can be intuitive and it keeps the screen relatively steady, but having to jerk the whole thing suddenly to home in on an object or swing it upward to make your Goombas jump or whirl it from side to side to spin Cappy around makes no sense. It compromises your line of sight. It puts undue stress on your Joy-Cons. You can feel creaking around. It looks and feels stupid. It's just uncomfortable, and it flies in the face of the idea that the Switch can be played anywhere and in any way that feels comfortable to you. And to make matters worse, the game doesn't compensate for whatever position you're in when you play. If you want these motion controls to work, you've got to be sitting upright. Holding two detached Joy-Cons just like the game suggests, but leaning back on your couch, the game ain't gonna know if you're trying to throw up or throw down or spin. Handheld mode, even worse in this regard. I spend most of my handheld time in bed lying on my back.
Odyssey,
Therefore, none of this works. I can sometimes get a spin to work, but a lot of the time the game thinks I'm trying to just throw Cappy while I'm moving to set up my big stupid arm motion. Then, even if you are sitting upright, don't move around too much or else the game is going to think you're throwing when you're not and mess up your moves. Like I said, it doesn't completely break the game. What I've done to make my experience better is to lay out some rules for myself so that I'm I'm not constantly trying to
And I
fight
don't
with the
think it's
controls and shaking them
actually
around all over the
a
place.
problem.
I always
I think
throw with
he's,
Y, and in the off
overplaying
chance
it
I
a
want to
bit.
home in on something, I give my
Question,
controller or
have you
switch
heard
a
of
quick
Bomber
downward shake.
Cyberpunk? No, I
Throwing
saw
Cappy
it was,
up or down is simply out of the
it's
question.
a,
Those are moves I just don't use. I can't use them most of the time.
Jet
If I
Set
want to
Radio
spin but I'm not
thing,
in a
isn't
hurry,
it?
I do it the manual way, and I've gotten a little better at pulling it off more
version
fluidly.
of Jet Set
Then,
Radio,
in the
it
cases
looks
where I
cool.
need to spin quickly or make a
Except
capture
it's
jump extra
skateboards
high, I
and
very
not
carefully
roller
and
skates.
purposefully fling my controller or switch in the proper direction. So basically, in order to make the game not frustrating, I've resigned to using certain
never
moves
really got
rarely and
into
grudgingly
Jet
and
Set
other
Radio,
moves not
so-
at all. And if you ask me, this kind of compromise
it
should
looked
not have to
interesting, at
happen.
least.
Motion controls should be there to enhance an experience, not drag it down. Take Pikmin 3, for example. You can use nothing but the gamepad to control your guys, but if you use a Wii Remote and Nunchuck, you can aim around the screen in a way that just wouldn't be possible with a regular controller alone. Or more recently, look at ARMS. The Pro Controller works fine, but mastering the motion controls puts you at an advantage because you can curve your punches. But with Odyssey, the motion controls do nothing to enhance the experience. Some people like the physical, tactile sensation of moving their arms around and having that translate into the game, but again, that should not be forced on anybody. This isn't Wii Sports, where the point is moving around. This is Mario, where the point is enjoyable and accurate platforming. Odyssey's
spending
biggest sin here is
too
that
much
providing
time
button
on this.
alternatives
I get-
for all
I
of
get
these
it, dude, that you don't
motion-controlled
like the,
actions would be
motion
exceptionally
controls.
easy. They could patch the change in tomorrow if they felt like it. Okay, look, here, watch. A and B both jump and X and Y both throw Cappy. How about you tap Y once to throw, once again to home, and a third time to spin? What? Bam! You home in on something. Bam! You're spinning, just like that. Then you hit X to throw Cappy up and B to throw Cappy down. If you want to jump extra high or whatever while controlling a
just sounds
capture,
too
map the
confusing.
move to X. There, I just did it. I just fixed the game and made it possible for anyone to enjoy in any position and with any playstyle, all while still only
But like
using
the
face
thing
buttons.
is, you don't actually need
I know
to
a lot
use
of
any
people
of those
don't mind
moves.
this whole thing, and I'm way happy
So
for
I
that.
don't
And I'm also
understand
sorry that I'm
what the
annoying
problem
them
is.
by
It's
talking
just-
about this so much, as
The
apparently a
only
lot of them
thing you
tend to believe
actually-
anybody
you
with
don't
the issue
have
is
to use them,
objectively
but it's
wrong.
nice to be able
But
to
a
use
lot
the
of other
spin.
people feel the same way I
And
do.
that's the only-
All of my
only
Switch-owning
thing.
friends are grumbling about it. One of them bought the game and is just trying to deal with the controls, and the others are having second thoughts about getting it at all. One of them plays his Switch almost exclusively in handheld mode, so he's not even sure if it's worth the hassle of swinging his system around or missing out on a bunch of moves that make the game more fun. Say what you will about lazy, entitled,
Jet Set Radio
overreacting
can be played
gamers,
on
whatever,
Microsoft Store
but it
PC,
isn't
so
a
playing the
crime
first
to
game
want
in
to
the
be
series is
comfortable when you
difficult.
play,
Thank God.
and for
Oh,
many
really?
people, this is
Huh.
just not comfortable. And
I
again,
might have
just
to
because
check that
you
out
think
too.
it's fine,
I mean,
it doesn't mean
it's
these
not like
people
my
are making
backlog
it
is
up. Look,
empty at
this
this
would be
point.
much more forgivable coming from any
it's
other
just
less
constantly
monumental
growing.
game. Or, like I said, if these controls
There's so
literally
many
did
games.
anything to actually enhance the
Too many
experience, to do something not otherwise possible with
Way
just
too many
sticks and
games to
buttons.
play.
But with Super Mario Odyssey, the biggest, most content-packed
Someone should
Mario
invent,
ever,
like, the
made all the more
30-hour
amazing by
day
the
or
fact that we
something.
can play it on the go. It's inexcusable. I want the handheld experience to be just as fun, and just not using these moves, as many like to suggest, makes the game less fun. Period. Nothing so
No, it
simple and above
doesn't.
all avoidable should be present to mar a game this special, this important. And now allow me to elaborate on the problem further for another 20 minutes. No, just kidding. That's it for what I would call the straight up bad stuff, but here's some softer and more brief criticism. You've got kingdoms, which are wonderfully designed with lots to do, yada yada yada. Then you've got those bonus stages that function more like a traditional linear Mario, where platforming is more often the focus. These are naturally where the tightest technical design
believe
comes
he
into
spent,
play,
like, 5 minutes
but
talking
I would
about the
say that
motion
they're not
controls.
as expertly crafted as most stages from, say, Galaxy or 3D World. And the size of this problem depends on who you are. For platforming aficionados, this will come as a disappointment. For folks like me, who place more value on all of the other good stuff, not so much. Now, don't get me wrong,
And
I
that
do
was
appreciate a
actually-
good platforming level, and I
that
would
was
enjoy some
actually
tighter and more clever design here.
core
These
point of the
stages were
criticisms
Nintendo's
against
chance to
this
have their
game when
cake
it
and
first
eat it
came
too,
out.
to please
Like he
fans of
says,
both types of
a
Marios.
lot of people
Not
were
going
talking
all
about
out
the
on them
motion
is
controls
something
and
of
how
a
you
missed
can't
opportunity,
use them
though I have to wonder
in
if allowing
handheld
for
mode,
such
when in
freedom
reality,
of movement made
it's
tighter
not
design
really central to the game
difficult.
at all, so-
Additionally, I think the bosses could have been better overall.
It's-
I humongously appreciate
yeah,
that we
it
got
just
these
sucked.
rabbit dudes instead of Koopalings or something equally plain.
not
And the
be able
game's
to
boss
use them,
battles are
but
certainly fun. There are a few that just
It's more
blew
of
me
an
away
extra
visually.
thing you can
But
do.
I don't
instead
know.
of
They just could have been better,
central to the
more
game.
interesting mechanically, especially considering how many new moves Mario's got. Galaxy 1 and 2 especially had some really grand, really creative bosses. But Odysseys just don't quite hit that mark in most cases. It feels like most of the work went into the world and the bosses were maybe secondary. These are a few reasons that while I think Odyssey is a masterpiece and it's already become one of my all-time favorite games, it's not all that it could be. It's not like it's as good as a Mario game can possibly get. And it's funny because it's a lot like Breath of the Wild in this way. Both games are exciting new titles on Nintendo's exciting new hardware that do exciting new things and are overall just blowing people away with how stupidly amazing they are. But they both have a lot of room for improvement. And really, when you think about it, that's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with doing something new and then improving on it later. That's
When is
exactly
the
how
Mario
games
Odyssey
and sequels
version
work,
of,
actually. And as I often say, with
Tears
great
of the
games
Kingdom?
containing elements that don't live up to their potential, that in fact only makes me more excited
Like
for
a
future
game that
titles.
just
This game is amazing times 1,000, but
everything
it's
the
just
previous one
begging
did,
for an
but better.
even better sequel. But let's hit on just a few more topics before wrapping up this review. Music and sound. Like any Mario, Odyssey is very easy on the ears. The varied and fantastical elements of the game world bleed into the tunes. You've got a wide assortment
Yeah,
of
really
different
wish it
styles.
used the background
I will
music,
say that the
or
music too often
used
takes a
music
backseat
from
for my
Odyssey
liking.
as the background
It is,
music.
once again, much like Breath of the Wild in that way. There are some areas where I can spend hours running around, and when I leave, I can't for the life of me remember what the music was like. However, there are definitely a handful of standout tracks that pass the do I hum it later test with flying colors. Often I feel like the most interesting music is in secret stages rather than in the main areas. One cool thing though, if you've got a favorite track, you can access it from the song menu at any time and have it play for as long as you want. Why don't more games let you do that? As far as general sound design goes, it's great.
forgot about
Sound
that.
effects
It's
all sound
actually
good,
a
though
feature.
is it just me, or do Mario's footsteps not quite match his footfalls when he's running at full speed? Huh. I don't know. Anyway, if there's one sound-related
think
thing that
it's
really
because they're
jumps
too
out at me,
fast for
it's
you
the
to actually
voices.
notice.
Mario's tried just having text, often with little vocalizations to punctuate lines, and it's tried having voice acting, though this time it's hit something of a middle ground, at least with cutscenes, that I think is perfect. Whenever certain characters are talking to you, they speak in a kind of gibberish language, and it's actually been recorded to fit each line, rather than being compiled from randomized sounds, Midna or Banjo-Kazooie style. This makes it feel like they're actually talking without bringing a bunch of real words into the mix, which I'm not a big fan of with this type of game. So by now we
Speaking
know
of
that the
bosses,
game
I
is
know Super
phenomenal.
Mario
The
Ranch
worlds
and
are great, the
Crank
gameplay is
series,
great, the
but
music
still,
is great, the
Odyssey's boss
controls
fights
are
are way
actually
better
great.
and more memorable
But what about
than
the end
Rift
game?
Apart
What about
boss
when you've
fights.
collected enough moons to get to the last kingdom
It's
and beat
something
the
about
last
the
boss?
type
Well,
of
my
game
friend-
too, right? Rift Apart is a third-person shooter action, while Odyssey has a bit more. I don't know. It can get a bit more creative with its bosses with the whole possession mechanic and stuff. But yeah, I think you're right. I think I fought 2 bosses during my when I actually got to play Rift Apart, and yeah, they basically just stand still and shoot. And I play on the harder difficulty too, so.
Friends, Nintendo undoubtedly knew that they had something special on their hands because this is yet another way that Super Mario Odyssey soars above its predecessors. Like I said earlier, getting every star or shine in 64 and Sunshine was a big chore. And in both cases, between the credits and the time when you nabbed your very last thing and the game gave you your tiny little prize, there was nothing. There were no other rewards, no real motivator outside of, hey, it would be cool to get everything. But holy pants, Odyssey knows how to keep you playing. The problem here is that I don't want to spoil anything. I'm actually considering doing an entire video on the endgame itself, maybe touching on a few of the other elements I couldn't talk about here for spoiler reasons, kind of a sequel review for people who have played the game, so let me know down in the comments if that's something you'd like to see. But anyway, I'll just say that the game continues to reward you as you continue to collect moons. It motivates you, it keeps you engaged. And this is great, of course, because of the fact that, as you know, there are 1,000,000 moons to get. The result is not only the funnest Mario ever, but the most content-packed and replayable. And for a guy like me who already cherishes the admittedly vastly inferior 64 and Sunshine and replays them at least once every 1 or 2 years, this means the world. You see, to me, there are great games and there are special games. There are games that I love, that I think are expertly crafted, that I even give perfect scores to. But then there are the ones that I want to play again and again, the memories of which I carry with me forever. I suppose it's a little too early to say if the experience of playing Odyssey for the first time will be with me just as strongly when I'm 50, but I already know it's something I'm not going to want to stop playing for years to come. Nintendo's just got this way of making games that aren't just new games that we play, and it's great, and we move on to the next thing. Particularly when you're talking about flagship franchises like Mario and Zelda, they make games that really stick around. For big fans like myself, Nintendo games don't just pass by on a conveyor belt, one after the other. It's more like they feed into a well. Replayability is such a big thing with their games.
Rift Apart as a whole, obviously, but I will say this: expect a lot of deja vu when it comes to Rift Apart boss fights, and not in a good way. Ugh.
That the library doesn't
Sounds
cycle,
harsh.
it grows. And a title like Super Mario Odyssey
but then again,
is a
when
big,
have Ratchet
permanent
Clank
addition to
bosses
that
been
library.
created?
It's one that begs for the gaming world to dig into it, talk about it, master it, and return to it many
I think
times.
the correct
And yes,
answer
that's
is
what makes
never.
the motion control thing so much harder to forgive. The game is such an achievement that any problem so avoidable is all the more baffling and disappointing. But look past that though, and you've got yourself the most creative, exciting, ambitious, beautiful, and, for a fan of sandboxes like me, fun Mario game ever created. One that sets the bar so high stylistically that it's hard to imagine where the series will go next. It's not the most perfect and amazing game possible from a design standpoint. If you're looking for intricately crafted platforming levels, you're better off going back and playing Galaxy 2. And to be honest, if you watch too many of the game's trailers, it probably won't rise above the hype Nintendo built in your head. I went in hoping that it would surprise me by being bigger than it looked, but it's not. Nintendo showed us just about everything the game has to offer, which is a big issue that, again, we'll talk about later, but even just meeting my hype and expectations is still a big accomplishment considering how high they were set by those trailers. Just as I knew would probably be the case after that fateful night back in January, playing this game is pure joy. It's like being in a gigantic fantasy playground with something delightful around every corner. And because of that, it's my new happy place. When life's getting me down and I want to just be happy and be enjoying something, I can pop it on in a few seconds and fill up that joy meter. I think it's probably no surprise to anyone that Super Mario Odyssey gets a 7 out of 7. Woo! Thanks for that, man. I really...
Okay. I don't think there's anything more other than Patreon shout outs. Damn. Can I please just get to talk? So chat, what do we think of Arlo's assessment of Odyssey? I think that this was surprising. I watched his big fat Pikmin review, or whatever it was called, recently, and not a fan of that one, because it said a lot without saying anything. I think he's got some good points, but there's still a lot of saying nothing going on. Like, collecting moons is fun. And it's like, okay, why is it fun? Please delve a bit deeper. But then again, I think I'm expecting too much from a classic review, which is what this is supposed to be, I think. So in that sense, I think he does a good job of explaining what it's about. I didn't get as much out of the video as I hoped I would, though. I mean, this is a unique take. One of the few YouTuber reviews that came out for the game back in the day. I know what I said was harsh to say, but when you experience a game like Rift Apart, made by developers with over a decade of experience, published by a billion-dollar company, it's hard not to be harsh. Yeah, I get that. And, like, the soullessness of the cutscenes in Rift Apart 2. I mean, it feels like they're trying to be a movie, but it's not a movie, it's a game. And you can see that by just going into the settings. They have film grain, they have vignettes, there's so many film effects to make it seem like you're actually watching a movie that it's almost like they forgot that they were making a game and thought they were making a movie. It's really bizarre. And when they do that, it kind of loses a lot of the charm of the Ratchet and Clank games. The most obvious example of that would be with the 2016 remake of Ratchet and Clank 1. and it doesn't seem like they have learned a lot. Like they've all learned almost nothing in terms of presentation from that game. Like the gameplay is fine, the graphics are fine. It's a bit too cluttery. But when it comes to the cutscenes and everything, it doesn't feel like the characters are there. It just feels like empty, soulless husks making conversation. At least for a lot of it. And that's, by the way, full disclosure, that's me being only 2 hours in. How dare I mention that game? Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, I should have put a content warning. Something. Yeah, I don't like it either. It's probably the biggest disappointment I've ever had. This booting up that game and looking at what it had become. I mean, zombie T-Rexes. I mean, I understand that it's for kids, but come on, who thought that was a good idea to have like oh psych, it wasn't actually a zombie T-Rex. It's just a case of an unreliable narrator. Like, who thought that was a good idea? Come on, Insomniac. Please treat your IP with more respect than that. I can't wait to tear that game apart, by the way. But it's still going to be a while, though. Still have the PlayStation 3 games to get through. I know that game isn't terrible, but dear lord, it feels terrible. Yeah, I mean, the gameplay is fine. But everything else is just straight up. I mean, the biggest problem is that it's based off one of my favorite games. One of my all-time favorite games. And then it just butchers everything I loved about the story and the characters. That's the main problem with it. But anyways, that was Arlo. Did a good enough job, I think. But that's also the end of the stream. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined. Had a good time, as always. I might do another one on Saturday. Gonna have to check the schedule, but there might be another one on Saturday. So if you want to, stop on by. Talk a bit. It'll be fun, I promise. We're gonna watch... we're probably gonna watch at least King K's video on it. He tends to have some stuff to say. And it's also one of the videos later in the timeline of Super Mario Odyssey. So it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say. I've watched it before, but I can't remember anything about it. So, anyways, if you have any video suggestions, just write them out in the comments. Other than that, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you all for joining me in this stream, this work stream. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.